I'd like to call the meeting of Tuesday, October 6th, 2020 to order. The time is 6:34. May I have a roll call, please?
Davalos.
Here.
Mellon.
Here.
Wimet.
Here.
Rastrelli.
Here.
Wellington.
Here.
Yaffe here. Vote.
Here. Okay, the first thing we have is citizen comments, but before we do that, I'd like to just make a quick statement on behalf of the board. Hello, everyone. We'd like to thank you for all your thoughtful emails, for those who are watching online, and for those who are here to speak tonight. The last 7 months have been exhausting for everyone, parents, students, teachers, administrators, and staff. We are all facing challenges that are unique to our personal situations, and they can be overwhelming at times. It's difficult for students to miss out on all the positive academic and social experiences that school provides. Parents suffer as they watch their children struggle academically and socially. Teachers worry if they are reaching their students and making the academic connections and making the social connections. Administrators are trying to figure out how to meet everyone's needs during this unprecedented time. Everyone is worried of what lies ahead, but I would like to ask us now, we must work together as we navigate through this difficult time. I am proud of our community and all the input that we've received, because it shows how much our community cares. And we've never expected or experienced anything like this. So let's be thoughtful and respectful as we take the next steps forward. There is no ideal solution that works for everyone, but I know everyone wants what's best for our students, and I know working together we will get there. So I know the citizens' comments, there's probably quite a few tonight. So I'm just gonna kind of lay out the ground rules. The Board of Education welcomes citizen input. Citizens are reminded to limit their comments to 3 minutes. Normally we have 20 minutes allotted for one topic. We've expanded that tonight because I know there are many who'd like to speak. And so it will be 3 minutes per person. And Tom Wimet, our Board Vice President, will let you know when you have 10 seconds left. And also that matters regarding employees or confidential student matters will not be allowed, or nor will we respond. So this is a board meeting. It's information for the board. We are happy to hear your comments, but we will not be engaging in anything afterwards. Know that when you talk to us, we are listening to you. We are hearing what you're saying. So the first person that I have here is Evan Brown.
Would you like me to keep my mask on while I speak?
I would like you.
Good evening, board members. My name is Evan Brown. I am a sophomore at Mundelein High School, and I'm involved in several activities, including golf and band, in which I am a drum major. As myself and many students have seen, e-learning is not a very sustainable long-term learning method. Neither the method used in March nor the method used in the later months, such as now, meet the needs of students across the board. First off, academically, there are not opportunities to get help from teachers and tutors, utilize workspaces, and receive the same overall level of instruction as there is in in-person school. Secondly, socially and emotionally, there are slim to no opportunities to socialize with friends, teachers, and staff during the day and keep up the overall human interactions that we need. As a drum major, I have many connections to students in and out of band and of many grade levels. And many of these students have voiced their concerns to me on how the band program specifically is restricted from running how it normally does, which inherently restricts many deeply valuable social connections and musical education opportunities. They have also talked to me about the inability for teachers to fulfill their teaching duties, and as they usually can in school, and for students to fulfill their learning abilities as they usually can in in-person school. This is not necessarily because of how anyone is teaching or running the e-learning system, but simply the inherent impossibility to educate and be educated the same as we can in person. Also, students with 504 plans, such as myself, are not being accommodated anywhere near to the degree that we usually are and need to be in in-person school. So for many people, this is not just a preferential decision and choice we are pushing for. It is a necessary one to provide students who are struggling with any of the aforementioned issues, or anything else for that matter, a chance to renormalize their lives. We need to have our educational needs met in a sustainable, tangible, and beneficial way, and we need to have this done in a timely manner. We need to have an option for consistent in-person instruction with connections daily to our teachers and peers. And what we do not need is simply a reallocation of the current e-learning system. We are asking for the absolute most sense of normal schooling that we can salvage while maintaining the coronavirus safety guidelines. We need and constantly want to be with you, our Mundelein High School teachers, our friends, our families, our peers, our staff in the Mundelein High School building, so that we can salvage our education and begin to revert it to what it always has been and should continue to be. Thank you for your consideration, and I sincerely hope that you will take into account what my fellow peers and I are saying tonight, so that we can start to better navigate this journey through this unprecedented time to work for everyone. Thank you.
The next person is Alexis Lee.
Hello, board members. My name is Alexis Lee, and I am a senior here at Mundelein High School, and I am also the proud older sister of a freshman at Mundelein High School. The proud younger brother in question is someone who has struggled his entire life with school, as he was diagnosed with Asperger's condition at the age of 4. This means that he struggles a lot with, say, like social cues or other learning cues that are typical for both in-person and now e-learning. The problem with this is that my brother feels like a, quote, bad student now. Let me tell you that my brother is one of the absolute smartest people I know. He is at a math course that is 2 years above his level. He is far smarter than me or anyone else I know. Why does the smartest person I know feel like a bad student? Why do I have to listen to him cry and throw his computer? Actually, he damaged his computer and we had to buy him a new one. Why do I hear this every single day? It's because he can't learn. He is not learning. He is failing 2 of his classes. He has straight C's in the others. He is not learning, and I feel him. I feel him. I feel that I am not learning in my classes. I wake up 10 minutes before my first class and I dread it. Half the time I sit there with my camera off, and to be very frank, I cry. I cry. I feel such a grief and loss for my senior year. And I wonder, how am I supposed to send transcripts to schools that don't necessarily reflect me as a student? I currently have a C in one of my classes, a class that I study for hours for outside of school, and I don't know what to do. I failed my first test. On the reassessment, I was only able to get to a C, and I studied the content. I tried, and I just couldn't do it. I too feel like a bad student, and I am not alone in feeling like this. At MHS, we all pride ourselves on our diversity in both race, sex, gender, sexuality, but also our socioeconomic status. How do you expect a child who, let's say, parents work 2 jobs and they are stuck at home needing childcare, or maybe they don't have the best Wi-Fi? How do you expect them to perform at the same level as a student who doesn't have to worry about working, doesn't have younger siblings at home, maybe has the best Wi-Fi you've ever seen in your life? How do you expect those 2 students to work at the same level? E-learning is not equitable and it is not fair. And the current system that we have fails students. And the current hybrid model that we have planned also fails students.
Alexa, you have 10 seconds.
Oh, okay, thank you. That's basically my main point, is how can you expect a student to work at the same level as someone who can't? Sorry, I'm kind of on the spot. Sorry. I am advocating for a consistent in-person hybrid schedule and of course a choice. Thank you.
Next person is Jordan Miller.
Good evening. I'm Jordan Miller, junior at MHS. I have the honor of presiding as the Vice President of the Mundelein Black Student Union and Deputy Director of the Mundelein My Brother's Keeper community alongside the Obama Foundation. The last 5 months, I've been lucky enough to participate in many social justice and equity programs. Through each of those experiences, I've been able to see and uplift a part of our community not many see. Not only do we understand the financial hardships parents are going through due to COVID-19 as students, we are also witnessing the physical, intellectual, emotional, and spiritual impact it has firsthand. I've been doing my part extensively in and out of school through programs such as Mundelein Scholars United, which is a Mundelein Black Student Union sponsored program that focuses on these very areas of our students alongside Trey Baker. We're meeting the needs of our community members by establishing the food drives to feed our families and the school supplies drives that provide precious resources for our children to continue exploring the everlasting possibilities of learning. People have rallied here today to tell you why we must go back to school, but I'm here today to give you an understanding of why some of us simply cannot. With unemployment affecting many families, most students, including myself, have had to get jobs to pay bills in the house. This is in addition to caring for others who may have moved in due to the pandemic. The added uncertainty of health is overwhelming for some. I want to make sure you consider the education of those unable to provide their own transportation to the school, though they earn to show up. I want the education of those who choose their family and health over personal connection to be valued. The energy and commitment we put into the community members that we have the honor and privilege of serving is the same energy we must put into this plan to return back to in-person learning. We have to fight for it. We have to work for it. We must not take this moment and momentum for granted. In your decision, I need you to ensure that their education will not be hindered. For those who are fighting for their kids to go back, I hope it's for their education. Thank you for listening.
Trey Baker.
Good evening. Again, just for the record, my name is Trey Baker. I'm a senior at Mundelein High School, president of the Mundelein Black Student Union, and director of the Mundelein My Brothers Keeper community alongside the Obama Foundation. We have assembled together to take into account a strategic plan for the choice to return back to in-person learning and the capacity in which we can execute this with resources we have. We have a student body that is experiencing learning in a whole new atmosphere, with a faculty that's teaching students they possibly never met and seeking those relationships with their students to grow their engagement within the class. We have a student body that is energized and ready to return back to school. However, we must take into account our student body that is working a job, babysitting siblings, questioning when their next meal is, worried about the possibility of infecting their elders that they live with, and on top of that, cramming in their life as a student. This part of our student body is not ready and or cannot physically go back to school because they don't want to put their families at risk. It's important that when we draft our action plan to return students that we are able to go back to school, we do not overemphasize one platform of learning over the other. Those at home who cannot attend school at this time are ensured the same level of attention, same level of intensity, and same level of generosity, and the same level of commitment to their education. We also have to look at the number of classes we can provide for each day of this week. Instead of 4 groups, do we have enough capacity for 2 groups? These are possibilities worth examining. Due to COVID-19, we're experiencing a new normal that's impacted our community members and students' social, emotional, and mental health. It's important we provide space for both classroom scenarios to continue students' excellence inside and outside the classroom. In the midst of adversity, we remain to execute. In the midst of adversity, we must execute today, tomorrow, and for years to come. To my beloved brothers and sisters watching, MHS faculty, student body, administrators, and families in the community, we are part of experiences today that are making us more resilient, making us tougher, making us more creative, forcing us to use our mother wit and think on the spot in terms of how to handle things. If you harness what's already in you, then you'll actually be a step ahead and not a step behind. But you're gonna have to focus on it. You're gonna have to dig deep in terms of effort. Don't feel discouraged, but embrace the challenge that you're gonna be already facing, and know that you're gonna have a lot of people around you who are not just rooting for you, but are also willing to commit to putting in resources to help you achieve your goals. When the sides come off the boat, we'll be there to keep rowing. If you lose one of your paddles, we'll be there to continue rowing. Hope. Don't let some type of evil, don't let some type of hatred, don't let some type of circumstance, don't let some type of situation defeat your hope. 381 days, 500 miles. If you are stronger together, you know what I'm talking about. Commitment to each other every single one of our babies. We have to commit to our obligation to serve and protect the education of every single student and build everything we do in the conversation of not just surviving, but thriving. Thank you for your time. It's been a blessing to be able to connect with each and every single one of you today. I look forward to continuing to work together in uplifting and empowering our educational systems.
Lauren Carlson. Addison Solski.
Good evening. I'm Addison Selsky and I'm a junior at Mundelein High School. Thank you for listening. To begin, I want to address some problems with e-learning that demonstrate how valuable being in person is. E-learning is not preparing us for the future. For example, we have no labs or experiments in science that help us understand the course material and dig further into our academics. Also, we are learning less content in the same amount of time, leading to units that might not even be covered by the end of the year. Additionally, as a student who is trying to take harder courses my senior year, I feel very behind in my academics to even be approved to jump ahead. Therefore, this in-person time is crucial for academics and learning. I also want to address how e-learning has impacted me as a student. This is one of the most emotionally draining times I have ever been through. 7 months ago, the school was my second home. I would be here at 7 in the morning and sometimes leave at 9 or 10 at night. Additionally, some of the classes that would fuel my joy are now the classes I dread going to the most, and those are the music classes. The hardest thing is that knowing as high schoolers, we only get 4 years. And 4 years isn't a lot anyway without the pandemic. So taking away another semester of in-person learning, when it has been demonstrated that it can be done, is hurting all of our opportunities in the future. Lastly, I want to address the new hybrid schedule that was released the other day. While it is a start, the amount of days we would be going in is not enough time for us to be supported in-person academics. We would still be e-learning 75% of the time. Compared to other schools, our plan is lacking creativity and thoughts that are outside of the box. Schools such as Friend, with approximately 600 more students than us, have found ways to have their students in person at least 50% of the time. Additionally, you are asking us to go half days, limiting our education even further. With all of this said, I thank you for your time and I hope that you will continue to evaluate what is best for all of your students.
Lauren Carlson.
Thank you very much for this opportunity to speak with you tonight and for your willingness to listen to a student's perspective. I'm Lauren Carlson, a senior at Mundelein. What I'm going to say represents my own opinion, but from talking with many of my friends and other students, I believe that I speak for more than myself tonight. I'm not here to say that it's time for every student teacher to return to school, and I'm not here to say you can't either. Neither of those is my place to decide. I'm here to respectfully ask that those of us who would like to return to school have the choice to return to in-person classes. I'm not a scientist or an elected official, but I do know that it sounds like no one is certain as to when COVID will be less of a threat than it is now. Our positivity rate is low. If not go back to school now, when? Some estimates indicate that we will be dealing with COVID to some level for years. I would rather choose to live these important months and years of my life with a healthy amount of respect for the virus, but not controlled by it. We can choose to go back to in-person classes, and I suspect I'm not alone in that perspective. As great as our teachers are, they can't help me develop the knowledge and skills I need to meet my goals through Zoom alone. Some things I learned in person and social interaction is essential for children, adolescents, and adults to be mentally well. I want to thank the MHS administration, teachers, and everyone involved for doing the important work together to put this first draft of a hybrid schedule. If I understand the proposed hybrid schedule, it would allow us in-person classes for 1/2 days per month. To be clear, that is 2 days per month. This is a step in the right direction, however, it won't be sufficient to meet our learning needs. I am also concerned with those days will be used for things like proctored testing rather than interactive hands-on activities. I would urge our teachers to use valuable time we are given with each other to prioritize labs, interactive lessons, and similar activities that have value to learning. I know this is not an easy ask for teachers as it may require 2 lesson plans and extra time. I know that I speak for the vast majority of your students when I say we are counting on you and we appreciate any extra help you can give. You can choose to, and we are asking you to lead us, mentor us, and help us with a sense of normalcy during this challenging time. Needless to say, this is not how I thought my senior year would go, but I choose to make the best of it. I choose to pursue the education I need to succeed with my future plans. I choose to make the most of my time I have left at MHS. So please let me choose to go back to school. Thank you.
And Vicky.
Good evening, my name is Ann Vikas. I reside at 295 Joshua Drive in Hawthorne Woods. I currently have a senior at Mundelein High School. I was asked to speak this evening by a group of parents called Our Voice, Our Choice. This group advocates for MHS families to have the option to choose between in-person or remote learning. Last week, the administration came out with a proposed hybrid model. We would like to thank you. We know a lot of time and thought and logistical considerations were involved in this plan. The plan shows us that you know the importance of getting kids back into the classroom. It shows us you are looking out for the welfare of our students. Thank you. For teachers, we know this might put you in a higher risk situation than teaching from home. Please be assured, we will support you. We will abide by all safety measures. We will not allow our children to attend school if they have symptoms. We will encourage wearing masks, washing hands, and social distancing. You have our support. Many professions are successfully back in the workplace. Many schools, even those in our own communities, are making it work. For our students who come from families who are worried about virus and safety and risk in their own home, we would like to continue to promote choice for you and work together so that in-person and remote students are receiving consistent quality instruction. While we continue to support your choice, we would ask you to support ours. 40 million Americans have lost their jobs during COVID. Families and businesses are going bankrupt. Keeping schools closed has an economic trickle-down impact. My coworker cannot come into work because she has to stay home with her 3 young children. My cousin, who sells suits for a living, is out of a job because there's no prom, there's no homecoming, there's no graduation. My nephew is failing classes because his IEP special needs aren't being met, and he can't get motivated to do things from home. Students are locked in their rooms. Things will get worse in the months to come as kids can't go outside anymore and the months drag on of e-learning. I work at Corner Health Foods, just right down the block. More and more parents are coming in looking for products to help their kids with anxiety and panic attacks. My friend, who is a police officer, is seeing more and more domestic violence cases. CDC statistics show us our kids are 8 times more likely to die of a drug overdose than they are to die of COVID-19. They're 9 times more likely to die of suicide than they are of COVID-19. Are we taking measures right now to prevent this? Sadly, on Friday, September 4th, my own aunt and uncle committed suicide together due to fear of the virus and isolation. If we could go back in time, let me tell you, we would let them see their grandchildren. These things are real consequences of the shutdown, but we aren't seeing these numbers in the daily news. What we are seeing are the number of new positive cases. Yes, they're going up. There have been close to 6 million tests done in Illinois, 650 positive cases in Mundelein. And the last I could find about 2 weeks ago, 0 deaths in Mundelein. So please don't be fixated on the positivity rate. My older sons and all their friends have to get tested in college. They're healthy, they're not sick, but they may come up positive. Please weigh all the consequences of the school shutdown. Keep in mind that the majority of our teachers are in low risk categories. There will be safety protocols in place, and all of our students have the option to stay home. We think the proposed hybrid plan is a great starting point, but we hope the administration continues to take steps to increase the number of minutes our students are in the classroom. Consistent in-person learning is critical for students with IEPs and special needs. It's a safe haven for students who come from dysfunctional or abusive homes. It's necessary for students considering the trades and is of utmost importance for students taking college entrance exams and AP tests. MHS can't fall further behind the other schools in our conference. This affects things like property values and whatnot. We don't know how much longer this virus is going to be here. It could be 2 more years, guys. We have to take action now. We can work together. We can make it happen. Thank you very much.
Ron Solomon.
I'm Ron Sulsky, resident at 1342 Kettering Road, and I have 2 MHS students, a freshman and junior. Thank you for volunteering your time as board members. It's very difficult during these times, and it's never easy. On behalf of Our Voice, Our Choice, over 220 parents have signed a petition. My 3-minute comments are about duty, what if, and leadership. You decided to take a sworn oath in accordance with the Constitution of the U.S. and state of Illinois and volunteered to make difficult decisions for the education of all kids, not just your own. In your oath, quality education of every student. Set the course for MHS, establishing a structure and an environment designed to ensure all students have the opportunity to attain their maximum potential. Government agencies take risks all the time, and you and we take risks as well. What's great is you have the best what if option ever. You have choice, you have hybrid and e-learning. You can serve students in 2 different ways while creating a safe environment. What if it is successful? And this can be used for future situations. Boards don't get an opportunity that is a safe win-win option that meets the vision, goals, and all. We can use what if negatively, or we can use it positively. With a positive experience, it does what? It helps people reach their maximum potential, the oath. Of course, you're going to hear all the negatives that you did in July. What if people are going to die? What about the teachers? What if the teacher's called sick? My child, dangerous, all the negatives. What if the stats of the mental and well-being of the student impacts outweighs the negative what ifs? Because we are too scared when precautionary measures are taken. Scared leadership is one of the worst leadership qualities and inhibits vision. Then we are telling the community that our high school has a lack of vision, and we know that you don't. What if teachers, you and people against hybrid choice have been taking risks safely, such as your own kids' sports, going to the grocery store, going on vacation, going out to dinner, being active? We've observed that in many ways. We've done that ourselves as a group. What if the teachers are essential to the health and well-being of the students? They are. You heard it from these students. You see it in the high schools in the area. What if there is a case and the administration handled perfectly? We are confident they can. What if a teacher can say to the students, I feel safe at school? What impact would that have on students? What if the boys basketball finished the season in March? My opinion, easy victory over Stevenson for MHS boys and potential state title. What are we asking tonight? Discuss, pick a direction soon, and understand hybrid choice that provides a quality education for all. Your oath. Your own signed sworn statement that helps students reach his or her potential, maximum potential. Students and parents cannot wait anymore as other high schools are passing us by. You have the information and data. We requesting you not to make a decision tonight, but sooner than later. Madam Board President, this community can't wait. Time is of the essence. According to your policies, the board president can call a special meeting within 48 hours. We are asking next week that you demonstrate to us, the community, that you can take a vote. If you take a vote and it's 4-3, we understand that. But what we're teaching then, if it doesn't pass, is scared leadership. What if you voted on yes and it worked? What if your leadership and decision was bold and dynamic and was in the forefront of other schools? We encourage this leadership. Thank you for your time.
And thank you for everyone who came tonight. We appreciate your input. The next thing we have on our agenda is, yeah, was there anyone online on Zoom that you needed to address?
We do. Dana Fladhammer.
Okay.
Hello, can you hear me?
We have 6 more minutes we can do.
Hello, can you hear me in the room?
Yeah.
Good afternoon and evening. My name is Dana Fladhammer, and I am here today to discuss what appears to be somewhat of a, let's call a snow day when there's 5 inches of snow, and then the next day, when the road is full of ice and there is still snow on the ground, let's have the kids go back to school. Let me give you some numbers. On April 3rd, there were 1,200 positive cases. On May 2nd, there were 2,450. On August 10th, around the time that we made the decision not to return, 129. Today, there were 2,210, but 3,022 in Wisconsin, where some of our teachers live. The amazing voice of the students. They did a phenomenal job. But the reality is, being as it is, as difficult as it is, we are in the middle of a pandemic, and it is horrible and hard, but we have to do what we can to keep the voices of not just the students and not just those parents who believe in our voice, our choice, but also the voices of teachers. See if should have a voice, all groups should have a voice. It is coming. And how will we handle Thanksgiving when those students return home like my 2 from Virginia? What happens when they return from COVID hotspots? The teachers have a choice then. The problem with the argument of our voice is that we're not. If we want to be equitable, what we say at Mundelein we are about, then let's give every person, employee, to choose. Do they wish to do it in person or do they wish to do it from home? You see, when I read the survey, it said students who were in person would be taught virtually, but that is actually not true. And it didn't provide enough insight to things like what's to the AP student who needs to stay at home? What happens to the AP student 4 days a week is not prioritized? Because somehow we're expecting teachers to teach in person and remote at the same time. I would ask you this. I would ask you to please clearly lay out a plan by which if a student has an exemption from a mask, that parents are notified and get a choice, that teachers are notified and get a choice. I am asking you to clearly lay out a plan. What happens if they take their mask off? What happens if they, I don't know, their kids at one of the parents' house as currently? I would ask for you to set clear guidelines in the state, especially during the holiday season. But most of all, I would ask you this. As flu season is coming, and we know that we will go back to a remote option as it hits and the confusion between COVID and the flu becomes an issue. Why are we going to turn what has been established back in person for some, only to have to take it away again? It is heartbreaking to hear the mental health issues that some of these students are facing. The reality is, in person at school will not solve all mental health issues for all of our students. And I would push back on those students who are saying, oh, the 504s are never covered. And I will tell you, I know some, there are probably struggles. My son has an IEP, single problem. I would encourage you to consider that if we our choice, that applies to all who you expect to walk into the room. Thank you for your time.
Do we have anyone else? I think we have time for one more.
We do not have any others.
Okay. That concludes the citizen comments.
Can I say something real quick? Okay, time? Is that okay?
Actually, we're out of time. Sorry.
I don't know if you could hear all of the, hear all what you said, but imagine learning on that 6 hours a day. So you missed some of what you said, right? 6 hours a day.
All right, the next thing we will be moving on to is our consent agenda. Does anybody have any questions on it? Okay, I need a motion, roll call, one motion for all the items listed below.
So moved. Second.
Clement,
Yes.
Wellington,
Yes.
Yaffe,
Yes, vote, yes.
Davalos,
Yes.
Mellon,
Yes.
Australian.
Yes.
All right, the next thing will be, did everyone have any questions they had on the board packet answered? On the Monday call, are we all good on that? Okay, so next we will have the District 120 report from the superintendent's office.
Good evening, members of the board. Tonight, as you heard, we're going to be introducing the next step, is what we have with the hybrid plan. Before we get to that point, I'd like to thank all of the people that have been involved in the process, from the staff, the community, to you board members, and to hearing from our public. Those are all pieces of information that we do take to heart. We try to assimilate what we think we can do best at the moment for being able to meet the needs of our students, working with our staff, and we'll provide that support for our community. What you'll see is we've learned a lot since this past summer. The guidelines from ISB have become much more clear. Lake County Health Department has provided metrics, which we never had before, to help guide our decision making. And they're actually having consistency between the models with what to do should a COVID case become known. What hasn't become clear is still the individuality that all of our school districts have. That's why there's local control in all of them. So in going through the process of determining how to best be able to provide education during these unprecedented times, each school district is different. And we do need to look at what our metrics are for us and our community. Look at the actual physical space in our buildings. Our buildings are all different ages, different sizes. You have bigger and smaller classrooms. We have to take that in consideration. The transportation definitely is a need that we need to look at, and the square mileage that we need to cover and be able to get students picked up in a timely manner. The teaching and learning models that we have. One of the most important things that we can do is see how we can best deliver the education we can for our students, to be able to have the most time they can possibly with our staff under the circumstances that we're in. And the staffing. Looking at what our levels of staffing are for availability at all levels, from administration to our teaching, to our instructional staff, to our classified staff. How does that all play and be able to make this work? What we've been able to do is, since this past summer, is continue that work. And tonight, I think what you're going to hear are the different facets that we've been able to pull together for the next step of this process. Believe it or not, this is the 5th presentation since April about the learning model we're looking to provide at Wonderland. And that's because of how things change, how quickly they change, and how we need to be responsive. So I want to thank everybody again for your patience as we went through this process, because I'd be blind to you, it's been tough on all counts. But I'm proud of where we are, and I know we're going to keep improving and moving forward. So as you hear this presentation tonight, know that this is our next step in the process. We're going to continue to look at it and evaluate it as it goes along. And thank you for this opportunity to bring it forward. So to start it off, what I will do is share this past group that we've had. We broke up into committees. The first group coming up is going to be our metrics committee. And starting that off will be Mr. Dean Petros and Mr. Randy Lerner. Being able to go over the presentation on the metrics that we've decided would be some of the guiding posts for us to determine what level of educational support we would be able to provide for our students and our staff.
Good evening, everybody. This is our metrics dashboard. One key important thing when we talk about going back to school and whether or not we should go back to school is, what are the health metrics out there? Can we do this safely? not just looking at mortality rates, but also there's a lot that we don't understand about this virus. Okay, this could affect loved ones at home, not just the students, not just the teachers, not just the administrators, not just the people in the building. So what we want to do is to create a standard where people feel comfortable being back at Mundelein High School. So the Mundelein Education Association, which I am the president of, representing the faculty and all certificated staff and the administration, have worked together in terms of trying to come up with a plan that makes sense for everyone. So what we did was that we got together and we created 4 different phases. Now, this is not something that we came up with on our own. We're looking at Lake County metrics. We're looking at the metrics of our communities. And I say communities because our district is 36 square miles. It's not just Mundelein proper. Actually, part of Mundelein doesn't even go to Mundelein High School, okay? You know, that's another discussion for another day, all right? But the fact of the matter is that we are responsible for 36 square miles of your children's education. So how can we best do that? Local control, looking at our local metrics, okay? So we have 4 different phases here. We do have the metrics are weighted average for different rates based on positivity percentages related to students I can't read that last word. Populations, thank you. To take into account the different zip codes that feed into Mundelein High School. Some are going to be weighted more than others because of the percentages of the student body. And the metrics will determine how we will deliver the education to your kids. So we created these 4 metrics, and to the board, I apologize on behalf of the delegation in terms of some of the verbiage might be a little bit different than what was shared with you the other day. But this is the most recent example. And we're presenting to you now what we think it will be now. Things change. This is a very fluid, process. As Dr. Myers mentioned, this is the 5th presentation. Okay, so I'm going to have Mr. Lerner come over here and explain this to you. Okay. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone, board members, community members, those at home. So as Dr. Myers mentioned, as Mr. Petros mentioned, this dashboard was created very collaboratively with members of the MHS administration, the certified teaching staff, the MEA, our classified staff, MESA, and also input from the community from board members. As we put this together, again, not only do we look at the metrics provided by Lake County, the data provided by Lake County, but we also looked at what other schools are using and what have been put in place. And what we see as common is a phase-in opportunity to bring students back into the building, as was mentioned by many of our community speakers this evening. So I'm going to talk you through the dashboard in 2 pieces. Along the top half, we have our 4 phases. Along the left side, we have the 4 metrics that we're using to create a dashboard that will help guide us in our considerations of what our next steps should be. Along the top are our 4 phases. Again, this is with guidance from the Lake County School Dashboard, and by looking at some other community schools just to see what they're doing. Lake County's dashboard communicates, what they communicate through the school dashboard are 3 different considerations. A fully remote setting, a hybrid setting, and an in-person setting. What Mundelein High School and some other schools in the area are looking to do is to take that middle area, that hybrid, and phase that into pieces. So what we've done in that middle section is created an additional phase, so 4 phases. So phase 1 being full remote. Phase 2, and I'll kind of talk through where we are currently also. Phase 2 would be a hybrid learning model where we're starting to bring focused students groups back to the building for some of their learning. to address the different needs and considerations that some student groups need. Phase 3 would be a hybrid learning model in which we are starting to bring bigger groups, grade level groups, either an entire class or the full building in those different groups that some of the comments also refer to. And then phase 4 being a full in-person consideration for return to that. All of these again are considerations for when the metrics tell us this is the appropriate phase that we can be in. Then making sure we have all the pieces in place to address the concerns of our community, of our students, of our staff. Along the left-hand side are the 4 metrics, again, guided by Lake County and the health departments. The first 2 metrics I'm going to talk about a little bit differently than the bottom 2. The 4 metrics are incidence rate, positivity percentage, testing, and hospitalization. The reason I'm going to talk about those 4 a little bit differently is that the bottom 2, testing and hospitalizations, is provided. The only information we have is a county data point. So we know that the county, and we'll kind of go to the county as far as testing goes, is in a very good spot. The average return time for a test in Lake County has been about 2 days, which is under the threshold, which I'll talk about in a minute. Which basically is the testing in Lake County is doing very well. Again, hospitalizations, that last metric, the only data that we're being given on that through the dashboard is a Lake County data point also. So again, we are taking into consideration where we are as a county. The top 2, incident rate and positivity rate, what we discussed was digging deeper into that. Because as we know, Lake County, obviously Mundelein and our what feeds into District 120 resides within Lake County, but not always does what Lake County's demographics and circumstances are represent Mundelein, or vice versa. Not always does Mundelein represent all of Lake County. So being able to use incidence rate and positivity rate on the Lake County dashboard, we can dig deeper into the data and get individual metrics for all of the different zip codes that feed into District 120. So as Mr. Paisos alluded to, Mundelein High School in this conversation has decided to weight the averages for incidence rate and positivity rate to come up with a District 120 Mundelein High School data point for each of those, so that we are taking a look at the student body that is coming in and from the different zip codes and communities that they're coming into our school. Getting into a little bit of the numbers and how we will move through the different phases. I'm going to kind of go along with, I'm going to start from the bottom and work my way backwards, only because of the way that Lake County presents us information. So hospitalizations is probably also the hardest one. So I'm going to start with the hardest one first. To communicate, the way that they talk about hospitalizations is from one data point to the next, the number of hospitalizations from day 1 to day 2. There's only 3 things possible that can happen. That number goes up, that number stays the same, or that number goes down. So the way that Lake County has classified those 3 changes is increasing or non-increasing. So if that data point goes up, that is an increasing. If that data point stays the same or that data point goes down, they're classifying that as non-increasing. Lake County is communicating that if 7 out of the 10 days, if less than 7 of the most recent 10 days are increasing, or as they would say, 7 out of 10 days, non-increasing days, then that would indicate that we should be in a fully remote setting. If there are greater than or equal to 7 non-increasing days, that's where we would have a consideration for in-person. The one distinguisher also, which is why I started with hospitalizations, is they don't, in hospitalization, they are either communicating fully remote or in person. They don't have the consideration for hybrid at that time. Which is why when I talk about one of those bullet points over there, you'll see why that hopefully works together. Testing, again, their considerations is if the testing average is above 10, that's where we would need to consider being the full remote or consider the full remote setting. They're qualifying if the testing is less than 3 days, that we are in a good place to consider in person. And what we did for all of the next 3 is we took what Lake County guided us on and basically split the difference to create our different phases. So Lake County communicates 10 and above would be fully remote, below 3 would be in-person consideration, We split the difference to create our phase 2 and our phase 3 data. Positivity percentage, again, positivity percentage and incidence rate. This is where we can dig down into the data and look at our zip codes of our students in our community. Again, the Lake County Health Department, if the positivity percentage is greater than or equal to 8, that would indicate that we should have an all remote consideration. If the positivity percentage is less than 5, that would be a full in-person consideration. We took the middle, split that, and to be able to communicate where our threshold for the hybrid for small focus students groups and the threshold for then the consideration of grade level groups. And then incidence rate also greater than 14, Lake County Health Department communicates would be fully remote learning. Less than 7 would be the fully in-person. And we again split the difference to talk about the thresholds for our phase 2 and our phase 3 are 2 different versions of what a hybrid model could look like. So the way that these all work together is, let me make sure Mr. Petros talked about this first couple. So the way that this is all going to work together is we'll monitor daily all of these data points. Members from the committee will be visiting the Lake County's school dashboard data hub to daily look at the data points for all 4 of these, and we will use the most recent data that is able to be provided to us. We will dig deeper for incidence rate and positivity rate into the zip codes of the students in our community to create the Mundelein high school metric, which will then place us and we'll take a consideration as to where that places on us. The first bullet point up there is kind of how we're going to move each one of these data points from phase 1 to phase 2, so on and so forth, is that in order to move any one metric from one phase to the next, forward or backwards, for consideration of when things are going well in the community and COVID is being dealt with appropriately and maybe it's safer, those positive trends, but also in the considerations of, you know, the weather is turning, flu season was mentioned, and the unknown of how that data might trend, the consideration to move forward or backwards, that we would like to see 10 consecutive days of movement. And in order to figure out what phase we are in, we are looking for 3 out of those 4 data points to be in that certain phase. So Ms. Ortiz, we go to the next slide. So this is where we are at currently. This is based on the most recent data that we have for both the county and the Mundelein communities. And I'll briefly just talk you through this. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Perfect. So right now, the Mundelein high school metric for incidence rate falls within this data range. The positivity rate falls within our phase 3 metric phase thresholds. Testing, like I said, Lake County is in a good spot with that, averaging about 2 days. So that would be in our phase 4 threshold. And hospitalizations, if you go on the metric, hospitalizations bounces back and forth in Lake County. And that metric is actually, you know, when we talked through that, one of the reasons why we are considering 3 out of these 4 metrics. Because we're unsure hospitalizations is one that bounces back and forth. Hospitalizations is one that, again, you know, as mentioned before, it is impacting our communities in Lake County, but how is it impacting our students, our student body? Whereas as we're bringing students and staff members and just people back into the building, positivity rate and incidence rate are kind of the metrics that are going to communicate to you the level of safety and well-being that people are going to feel walking into that building.
And the hospitalization rate is a countywide rate. Just to reiterate that, we do not have a local rate for that. So it's one of the major indicators, but again, it's a countywide rate. So it's important, but to what extent, we're not really sure. Okay, and today we moved over to a phase 2 method. Okay, before today, all student remote learning, phase 1. Now we've had pockets of groups coming in for whatever reason, athletics, etc. There have been pockets of in-person learning. But starting today, we started phase 2. So Mr. Lerner said, if things are okay for 10 consecutive days, okay, let's say, things are fine, okay, that's great. Okay, if the metrics go to, let's say, a phase 3, okay, we can't just go rush and say, oh, today, it's hybrid learning for grade level groups. We can go and have this plan that's presented to you today. Okay, we have to make sure that this phase 2 works that we started today for 10 days. If this works for 10 days, then we can say, okay, we think it's safe. If phase 3, if we have the indicators say phase 3 is okay, then we'll move on to that. Okay, if things start to spike and things get out of control, okay, well then maybe we need to go back a level. So this is a quantitative way of actually looking at what is going on. And this is really, we're going to be driven by the data here.
So and again, phase 2 is where we currently are. We are starting to bring in focused student groups, as you'll hear throughout the night of different ways that we've been doing that. To move in, again, for any one of these, for incidence rates to move from phase 2 to phase 3, for positivity rate, what we're looking for is 10 consecutive days in that next piece before we slide that over. So positivity percentage, if we're going to slide that over to phase 4, we need 10 consecutive days less than 5. If we're going to slide incidence rates, which right now, again, the difference from moving into this phase 3 of the bringing in grade level groups in our consideration for the hybrid model versus just the focused student groups, when incidence rates show 10 consecutive days in our phase 3 thresholds, we would then slide this move over. We would then slide this over into phase 3. And that's when we could begin our phase 3 considerations of how a hybrid model can look, which is what you're going to hear from some of the presentations the rest of the evening for grade level groups or grade level groups.
But this isn't going to interfere with necessarily like Lake County saying, hey, the rates are too high, you need to shut down, kind of like what the state did on March 13th last school year.
Mr. Shaw?
I heard the term 10 consecutive days applied perhaps 2 things. One, for the metric to move us over to a phase, correct?
Yes.
Did you also say that before we can move from a phase to another phase, we have to have been in a phase for 10 days? Or did you not say that?
The Lake County guidance is yes. The Lake County guidance does say that you should, and that's to have districts pace themselves and make sure that we're not rushing from one end of the one phase all the way to the end. That the Lake County does have the consideration of when you move into that next phase, that you should be in that phase for 10 days before you change to a different phase. And the way that we've had the conversations with this metrics committee is that we're going to move forward with that being forward or backwards, that we would like to, when we're ready to move from phase 2, which we are currently in, to phase 3, that we've been in phase 2 for those 10 days, we're going to move into phase 3, and again, make the commitment for at least a 10-day, unless, as Mr. Petros just referenced it, if at any point the Lake County Health Department comes in and says, we need to slow this down a little bit, then we're going to slow this down a little bit. If Lake County Health Department comes in and says we need to go fully remote, obviously we're going to go with the guidance of the Lake County Health Department. And again, this is at the moment, some of the presentations that you're going to see after Mr. Petros and myself. We did also talk about the consideration of if the committee sees a spike a day or two, which isn't necessarily going to guide us into a full phase change, but that if we saw a spike or two, we would be able to bring those parties together, board members, administration, teaching staff, classified and certified staff, and say, hey, we're seeing a small spike right now. Perhaps we need to have a consideration on having everyone stay home in a remote setting for a day or two. And some of the flexibility we have in the proposed schedule could allow for that very nicely as well.
Any other questions? I'd just like to say that we have a question. Sorry, this comment was earlier. This is just for the board members.
Yeah.
It's a board meeting. It's not for the public. It's for the board members to make their decision. Sorry. would like to say that several meetings ago, we asked for concrete things to help us make decisions and ask for something like that. We clearly want to put into it and come a long way. So thank you for helping us have decision-making.
And this is important. We're glad that you're able to see it. We're glad that the community is able to see it. And frankly, the faculty hasn't seen this either. So the faculty are at home seeing this, and we're getting hit by, hey, what's it going to look like? What are the metrics? What are the standards? This is the standard that we're going to use for now.
And just to reiterate, this process was a highly collaborative. I think we all came out of this process really having a better understanding of what these metrics are trying to communicate, and when we're going to provide a safe environment for all parties that might be entering a building. And that was in the consideration of the way that we're creating the metrics and looking at our community and the zip codes that feed into our school, as well as the way we would phase in and start bringing focus students groups that need before we just go and bring the full, and when we're ready, that consideration for each of those next phases.
So we are in hybrid right now, technically. We understand that some people want to go more hybrid. This is the data that we're going to use.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, hello, everybody. My name is Mike Pope. I'm the Assistant Principal of Student Services at Mundelein High School. And I had the privilege of collaborating with some other administrators and staff members and union leadership to create the schedule for our hybrid. So some of our scheduling committee considerations, there's a reason why two of them are bolded at the top. Our top two considerations in building this hybrid schedule are to maintain a safe environment for everyone in the building and outside the building, and to maximize the in-person time with our students. Obviously, there's other considerations that need to be made. Schedule, it needs to work with other areas, committees. It has to work with transportation, teaching and learning, facilities, right? We need to allow some of our more vulnerable students that are attending right now to attend school every day. We needed to plan for unstructured times like lunch and free periods to make sure we had a place for those students to be in the building safely and still meet our 6 feet requirement. We needed to make sure passing periods were as safe as we could make them. Create a temperature scan process that is logistically possible and make sure that students arrive early enough to get through that process before they're in the building. To ensure intervention spaces are still accessible, because like, as you heard tonight, students are needing extra support. We got to make sure that's still available for our students. And then we need to make sure that some of our larger classes, the needs of fitting them into the building. We have large classes with band and fire and PE. We have large classes that don't have just 25 students in them. We need to make sure that those classes are safe and we need to find students as well. Yeah. And there are other considerations that didn't quite make the picture. All right, so before I start talking specifically about the schedule, I do want to talk a little bit about why the schedule works the way it does, and why it may not work exactly the same as some of our neighboring schools. You heard tonight some consideration for why, which is great. I'm glad we're getting some feedback about, we'd really like to know more and things like that. So I figured we'd address it next year. So I'm confident we don't work in silos. I know a lot of other administrators in area schools, and so does everyone in this room. So I'm very confident that every school that's coming back and presenting hybrids has similar goals that we do. Everybody wants to keep their kids safe, and everybody's trying to maximize the in-person instruction, right? I don't think we're unique in that. But there are some differences which will cause schedules to look a little bit different. So I want to give you a few of those differences and maybe why you're saying what you're saying. So for one, the number of students that choose remote, that will have a direct impact on the number of groups we need to create. So for what you're going to see in a minute, we are estimating 25 to 30% of our kids are going to choose remote. That's similar to what some other schools have experienced. It's similar to what the feedback we got previously when we asked, and it's similar to the feedback we're starting to get now. So we did have to make an estimate of what we're gonna see in order to create a schedule. But that's different in every school.
What facilities do you have in your school? Do you have a field house? Do you have a small cafeteria, a large cafeteria? Do you have 3 cafeterias? Some schools have a field house and 5 gyms. Some have 2 gyms. How many spaces in your building are not used for instructional purposes? How many spaces literally don't have students sitting in them during the 3rd period? Flexible spaces that some schools have. Gathering staircases, media centers, learning hubs, right? Some schools have a lot, some schools don't, okay? What's your staffing look like? Are you overstaffed, understaffed, overly staffed? How many support staff do you have? Do you have enough support staff that aren't directly tied to students in a classroom that you can rearrange their day to help supervise some of these students in the building? How big, and this is one people don't think about, is how big are your classrooms? Maybe not how nice they are or how much technology is in them, but literally how much square footage is in your classroom. How many students can you fit 6 feet apart in all of your classrooms? Those are different answers in different schools. So all of us want as many kids in the building as we can safely. But there are reasons why you're seeing some schools offer lunch and some schools don't. There's reasons why you're seeing 2 groups of students at some schools, 3 groups at others. You're going to see 4 groups on this plan, and you're seeing some schools in Lake County that have 6 groups of students. Those are some of the factors that go into it. And I just wanted to make sure that everybody heard it. Okay. So that is part of the why the schedule looks like it does. Okay. So let me talk about the similarities and differences as to what we're experiencing now. We decided as a group to stick with our red and gray and our yellow days. I thought you heard some of the comments, students are in a routine right now, and we didn't want to break the routine. So if you look, we're still sticking with red, gray, yellow, red, gray. If a week has 4 days, just like we're doing now, you'll lose the yellow day, you'll go red, gray, red, gray. Right? So we're going to stick to those same scheduling considerations as we're sticking to now. You're going to see a little bit of a difference in the time. Obviously, we're not going to have lunch in the building. So we would be ending, and I do want to point out, these times are a little bit tentative. We are still working with transportation to ensure that these times that they work. There may be a little bit of movement within these times, but you won't see huge movement from now until we actually start. There may be a little shift. Okay, so this is an exact, yeah, it may shift a little. Okay, you're not going to see a huge change in this. So you're seeing 1 hour class periods on red and gray days. Right now they're 75 minutes. So this is 60-minute class periods. The yellow day is currently 30 minutes, and in this model it's 50. Okay. So I do want to point out at the top, you're going to see 4 groups of students in this estimation of how many students will choose remote. Group 1 would go Monday and Tuesday. We did choose back-to-back days for a couple reasons. One is so the students that come to the school and are live, when I say live, it's in person. So group 1 would go in person back-to-back days, so they get through all their classes. Okay, so if you go back-to-back Monday and Tuesday, you experience all 8 periods before you go remote. On Wednesday, everyone is remote. Thursday, Friday, group 1 would now be remote. Group 2 is now live. So group 2 would go back-to-back. Thursday, Friday, go through their period. So when group 2 is in person, groups 1, 3, and 4 are remote. Okay, they're still in class, but they're remote. Okay. If Ms. Ortiz, if you go to the next slide. So this is, one more next. So this is the next week. Obviously, we've already had 1 and 2. Group 3 then comes on Monday and Tuesday, while groups 1, 2, and 4 are remote. Everybody remote, and then group 4 goes back-to-back days, while group 1, 2, and 3 are remote. We talked about this. Like I said, there are 2 reasons why we wanted to go back-to-back to get through all your classes, but there's also a little bit of a built-in quarantining in this model. So we do know that some of the schools that have gone back have had some cases. projecting anything, but we may have some students with symptoms. So this way, whoever comes, you're gonna have a 10-day quarantine away from school every time. So you come for 2 days, you're quarantined for 10. Okay, that does that to the safety of this plan.
That's just to clarify. So you're saying if someone, student,
Yeah.
has symptoms that doesn't pass the check or ends up testing positive, their 10 days are taken care of because that schedule somewhat absorbs that period.
A little bit, yeah. So you were already scheduled to be home while you're scheduled to be home, basically. Right? So you're not, so if you came and you had a symptom and you were already gonna have to quarantine, you're not actually now missing a live instruction day, is what I'm saying. Okay, great. Yeah. All right, go ahead, Mr. Keith. So I did talk about a few of these things. So the factors I talked about earlier, size of your classrooms, how much staff you have, we know those things. What we don't know still is exactly how many students are going to choose remote. So this could be a little bit fluid. You could see the number go down to 3, you could see it go to 5. Right? It just depends. It all depends on the number of students that choose remote. Okay. I believe a question came in a minute ago about how we're going to split kids into groups. I can't tell you that yet. So we are going to, Mr. Lerner and I have been working on this a lot. Depending upon who's coming and who's not, once you see which groups choose remote and who doesn't, we would like to make, whether it's alpha, transportation routes, I don't want to make a joke, but what color your hair is, like, you can split groups in a million ways, right? We would like to split the groups in whatever way creates those two factors, whatever's best for kids, safety and maximizing the amount of days they can come. So if we could split group, if we can make a split that allows 3 groups, but doing it this other way would make 4, we would prefer to make 3. Okay, so we don't want to tie ourselves to a split yet. I'd actually like to make sure that we create the fewest amount of groups as possible. Okay. I already said 60-minute periods instead of 75 and 50 instead of 30. That equals 170 instructional minutes a week. Right now there's 180. So they're very close to each other as we're experiencing now. I did talk, obviously we will not have lunch served at school, but we still will be providing lunch to the students that need it, just like we are now. And student lunch periods obviously will turn into a study hall or a free period. And again, I'm going to have to break those periods up into groups and actually make sure there's a place for them to go in the building, social distance. Ms. Ortiz. All right, and then I do have this slide as well. Transportation, I just mentioned we are working with our transportation department currently. The capacity is still 50 students or 50 people, excuse me, on the bus. We are planning on having staff on buses doing temperature checks before you get on. We will have assigned seats on the bus. We will follow recommendations, have open windows if possible. Obviously, some cold eventually, so that we'll see how that goes. And then I do want to address the students that aren't going to ride the bus. Obviously, if we have, for example, in this example, 4 groups of students, we can offer 4 times as many parking spaces, right? So those are going to be free. There will be a process to sign up. But we will still have a process and making sure kids are supposed to park. We will offer free parking, and that will allow more students to park on campus and so on groups of students. Okay. And that is my question.
Mike, I just want to clarify something I'm assuming here, but so in that model, staff and teachers would be there 100% of the time. They would be in the school.
Yeah, so what, I can talk a little bit about that. So what we're presenting tonight is like the student version of the schedule. Obviously, the staff version of the schedule, we're still working with the committee on that, because what you're not seeing is what the teachers will be doing from the main to right? So the students, that's what it will look like. It's a little premature for us to present what it will look like to the staff, because we're not quite through the committee work on that. So I don't know if I want to present anything yet, because I'd be speaking without talking to the committee. But this is what the students will do. Obviously, our staff is going to be working.
Mike, real quick.
Can you just speak loudly? There's a microphone a little hard for people online to hear. So can you, everyone just make sure you ask your questions loudly so the microphone catches it.
So Mike, a quick question on
in-person live scheduling, is there any metric tied to the dashboard that they were talking about earlier, that class time can increase if the metrics are good, instead of going till 12 o'clock, or the classes are only an hour apiece? Are we considering that as well?
So I just want to make sure I get it right. So extending the amount of time in those 4 periods or having more periods?
No, just extending the amount of time. If the metrics on that dashboard continue to improve and hopefully stay well, is there anything tied that could also increase the teaching time in the classroom? Because the metrics are good.
Yeah, like right now, the limiting factor is lunch.
Yeah.
So eventually you run into lunch.
Okay.
And right now, based on some of the factors I presented before, the spacing and spaces we have in the building, we are not able to have lunch in the building currently.
Okay. No matter the metric at all.
No, because it all depends on the requirements from the state.
Okay, thank you.
So to answer your question with the metric time, if we went to the position where we could be fully back in person, that far right phase, yes, that's where say we go back. That's where they're saying we need a vaccination and we're free to go again. That's where we can go to that.
Okay.
Yeah, the third phase we'll be able to have, hopefully the pregnancy students. The key factor is what Mike's saying is the restrictions we've got with facilities.
You know, 6 feet and the 50 people in the space, those are limiting us.
Thank you.
I guess I'm confused on how it is that lunch is such a limiting factor. I realize our cafeteria is small, but when you describe the other spaces in the building, what would it have to look like? What are the options that we considered to make lunch less of a factor than it is?
Okay. So one way of having it, if we really, and I don't know how much I want to get into this, but if we really prioritize lunch and we wanted lunch to happen, let's say it moved up, it's not number one, obviously safety and instructional. But if it was, we would just create more rooms for students to limit the number of students. No one's interested in doing that to have lunch, right? But we could, right? Our cafeteria right now, depending on how many kids are in the building, we have to plan for the day. Yes, we have kids that go off campus for lunch, right? And most kids don't. A lot of kids don't eat lunch in the cafeteria, but we have to come up with a plan that the day where they all do, right? So it's lightning outside, it's snowing, nobody's leaving for lunch, so we're all going to eat today. We do have to plan for all the students who are in the building. So right now, if you have 4 groups of students and you have 350 kids in a lunch period that are going to go through a lunch, we have to account for where all those students are going to go. Right now, we have the cafeteria. In our building, our cafeteria right now is already not even big enough to hold all the students that have lunch, right? Like we can't even fit 4:30 lunch. If all the kids have to go to the cafeteria, they'd be standing. Right? We just don't have the space already. And all those other spaces, other than a couple, are being used for class. So some schools are using gyms because they have field houses and other places. But our gyms, we have enough gyms for PE classes to be in them, but we don't have extra gyms. So the day that it rains and the PE classes are inside, the PE classes need to be in those spaces. So we don't have enough other spaces for kids to go to eat the lunch that aren't learning, that aren't classrooms.
Are there districts who are figuring out how to expand their space, like temporary buildings, like rental, and anything that might expand the amount of space people have?
Yeah, I do know Lake Forest at one point was having a lot of tents and just spending millions of dollars on it, but that was before winter was coming in and it's heated and all this stuff. So we're talking about lunch. There are ways that we could pull off lunch. I just don't know if it's what we should do. I guess what I would say.
Like in terms of circumventing lunch, I know I've seen in some districts and some community members have mentioned this idea of the split schedule where a group comes in the morning, leaves before lunch, gives the teachers a break, and then another group comes in the afternoon. Is that something that could be a consideration, or does that not work with our space scenario?
So I would say it's possible, but there would be a lot of things we have to work through. I'd be ahead of myself to talk about it.
Would it be based on, you probably need to spend more on transportation because you'd have to have additional bus routes?
Well, yeah, obviously you have bus routes, but there's other things that you'd have to talk about, like teachers union and things like that as well. Teaching time, but yeah.
Yep.
Thank you. Appreciate it. You learned.
Darcy, can you go back one, please? Okay, perfect. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about what teaching and learning will look like on a hybrid. When I first was presented with this concept, I said, yeah, there's no way. There's no way, right? The idea of teaching students virtually and teaching students in front of you. How does that possibly happen? But I knew we had to figure out a way to start to phase our students back in. So with the Teaching and Learning Committee, which by the way have been phenomenal, they have worked tirelessly for the last 5 months to figure out the 5 different plans that we presented to the school board. So thank you to them. Many of them are listening, I'm sure. And so we did a little bit of research which honestly, there's limited research on a hybrid model and what teaching and learning looks like in that, because no one's had to do it. At the university level, they've started to do it. So we've learned a few things from them. We talked to some other schools, and then we did some awesome simulations in our classrooms with me kind of leading them, and I'm incredibly technology challenged. So that was really something to watch. And what kind of the literature out there right now talks about is concurrent teaching. So this idea that both the in-person students and the remote students are engaged in the same lesson. Also called HyFlex, because education needed some more buzzwords. So all students, whether or not they are at home or in person, will engage in direct instruction, small group activities, the same type of stuff that they would do either online or in the classroom. I do need to say that I can't pretend this is going to be easy. Our teachers have successfully transitioned from an in-person to a remote in 48 hours. And then they've done it really well, right? And then they transitioned from whatever the spring was to what we're doing now, which has been pretty successful in terms of the survey data that we've gotten from students and parents. This adds another layer. There are going to be challenges and there are going to be obstacles to overcome. I am confident that our staff will figure this out because they're really talented. But I think that we cannot pretend, and it needs to be recognized, that this is going to be a challenge for our educators and for our students as well, because it is something entirely new that none of us have really experienced yet. And so I do want you to know that we are going to do our best to prepare our teachers for this hybrid model. We'll provide them with the training and the resources that we need. They will not be alone in this. And so I needed to publicly say that. So next, if we could move the slide. I'm going to talk a little bit about the different modalities that you can implement in a concurrent classroom. There's an art of teaching, right? And just like in the old days when we were in person, right? And everything was wonderful. Teachers did a variety of things in their classroom, and not everybody did the same thing. That is the beauty about being a teacher and being a teacher at Mundelein, is that creativity is fostered. And so concurrent teaching is not a one size fits all. I'm going to show you a few ideas just so you can get a sense of what teaching and learning would look like in this model. So direct instruction, this is pretty straightforward. The students who are remote and the students in the classroom will receive that what we often call lecture, right? And so they can view the smartboard, so the students remotely will be able to view the smartboard through a bunch of technology that I'm not going to explain right now. And obviously the in-person, just like all of you, viewing the screen, will experience direct instruction that way. Large group discussion. So this is really important, right? This is important in English classes and social studies classes and math classes. And so we wanted to ensure that this can happen in a hybrid model.
And so this, we did 5 different simulations to see how this could effectively work, because we need to make sure that the people in person can hear the remote students, right? And the remote students can hear all the in-person people. So what we discovered is we can do some magic, and we can put the remote students, we can bring them through the speakers on the smartboard. And then what's cool, and I didn't believe this could work until I saw it, is if I have my laptop right here, right? These awesome Mundelein laptops. Thank you, Dan Crow, shout out. So the camera and the microphone in my laptop will pick up your voices, even in a mask. Okay, I didn't believe that it could happen, but it can. Mr. Petros in the back would have to project a little bit. So we did discover that some people who maybe don't project as much as I do would need to do that a little bit more, but it is possible. The other thing we've experimented with is using a webcam with an embedded microphone in it. They're not very expensive. It allows the remote students to see a bigger range for the classroom, and also allows the remote students to hear the in-person students. We want to make sure that that class community that teachers have been working on building the last 3 months doesn't go away, because some of the students are in the classroom and the others are remote. So we did work on that technology to make sure it could happen. What if you advance, please? Couple other modalities, small group work. Small group work is the hallmark of the things that we do in the classroom in Mundelein. The Zoom breakouts, they're not ideal, I get it. It'd even be better if students turned on their cameras. Wink, wink. But what's so cool, and I've been in many of those breakout rooms, is students are talking to each other. And we want to maintain that. So in a hybrid model, the virtual students can jump into those Zoom breakouts, right? And then the in-person students can have their own small group discussion. Now, one of the things that I was worried about with that is, like, they can't move out of their desk. They can't make a little group. They still have to maintain social distancing. So we actually practiced talking with each other. So we had Mr. Lerner and Mr. Petros could have a conversation with their mask on in the back of the classroom without moving out of their desk. And then finally, independent work, or better known as asynchronous. And so there's definitely a time and a place for this. So students in person could do some independent work. The teacher can answer their questions. Then you have students at home remotely doing that independent work. If the teacher walks away from that laptop or desktop, the students at home could unmute and ask the teacher a question, because their voices are going to come through the smartphone speakers. So I'm going to pause there, and I'm actually going to turn it over to my co-presenter. I have one more slide, don't I? One more slide. I thought you were going to do that one too. Okay. Students will be 100% remote. So basically with the model I described, this is the same as many students are going to experience when they're not at school. So students who choose that 100% remote experience will have the same curriculum, instruction, assessments, those same lessons, right? Because all of that is live instruction that students at home and in person will receive. And so I just wanted to make sure that everyone understands that there will be that choice for students to stay home and be full remote, and they will still receive their same robust educational experiences that they would if they came into the building. Okay, so this point.
Yes,
oh yeah, sure.
Okay, so, we've heard tonight that people are concerned that, that the in-person experience with the teacher is a better experience. So how do we guarantee that the remote students are getting the same? How do we know that they're asking the questions, they're not feeling intimidated by the fact that they're remote and there are these students who are there? How does the teacher engage them and make them feel equal?
Yeah, so we've actually talked a lot about that in the 5 different simulations that we did. And we had some teachers at home on Zoom and some administrators in the classroom. And we actually had some lengthy discussions with mixed location folks. And what we found is because you can hear, right, it allows that kind of correspondence and it doesn't feel so separate. Like when you're in it, and Laura was actually in one of our simulations.
And I can speak a little bit to
Yeah.
this. So first of all, I'll just say I was extremely impressed with the creativity of the creative use of the technology to okay, so I was in the classroom and trying to figure out how to get, make everyone feel part of the group. And so they put a camera up on the whiteboard so that gave a wide view of the room so the person who's remote would see you. Then the microphone in the middle of the room would catch everyone. And if you had a laptop, but this was the nice thing. I have a daughter who would probably not speak up in class, but you could go to the chat room and ask a question. And that was a nice feature because some children are very confident and will just raise that hand and put it out there. But for her, I know she would be much more comfortable going into the chat room and typing her question. And the teacher has the opportunity to play off of all those differences of how children learn. And it was really, really interesting to see how we're being so creative with how we're using the technology. Because I am with you, like it's all new. Like it's a lot of how could we make it work? Let's try this, let's try that. And so kudos to all the ways you guys have figured to work it so it feels like the student is there.
It does. I mean, it does, right? All the people who are on the screen talking, I mean, it was kind of hysterical because you had 15 people trying to navigate all the technology. But one of the things that I also wanted to note that I probably wasn't clear on in the beginning is that students in the classroom won't be on Zoom. There might be some exceptions to this, but one of the pieces with the technology is that if all the teachers on Zoom and you're all on Zoom, you can join without audio, but anytime you click on your audio and you unmute yourself, there's this horrible like feedback, audio feedback. Secondly, we want to make sure our network is okay. So our tech team can absolutely, they have validated the fact that we can have teachers on 2 devices, but having all our kids stream Zoom at the same time could be a little bit challenging. And finally, kids are on screens. I know they're on screens a lot, but can we give them a little bit of break on being on Zoom?
Well,
Sorry,
what's
Laura.
interesting with the bandwidth, so when you have students in the classroom not on Zoom, it's just better for the bandwidth for the building.
Yes.
I would not have considered that in my population, but it was helpful, just to have those perspectives.
And it kind of feels a little bit more like school when they're not on Zoom in their classroom. So we are able to navigate the technology to prevent that from having to happen. And again, this is not going to be perfect, and we're going to make a lot of mistakes. Honestly, you should have seen me in these simulations. Lots of mistakes. Yeah, Peter.
2 questions. One is the expectation, knowing that there are always exceptions, is the expectation that if you choose remote, you stay remote? You choose the in-person option, you stay in-person?
So, yes, we've talked a lot about the idea of moving. The only thing that gets kind of tricky is if we have a lot of students who choose remote and we build those 4 groups, Mike said, based on, so what's tricky is when we presented the hybrid in the summer, ISBE wasn't so strict with their regulations about 6 feet in the classroom. So if we have a lot of students who choose remote and then they decide, no, I want to come back into the building, we've got to reevaluate our numbers because we can't start to push a lot more students into those classrooms because we violate the health and safety guidelines of ISBE and the Illinois Department of Public Health. Yeah, thank you. So we gotta work through exactly what that's going to look like.
My facial expression is this. So what does that mean? Yes?
Okay.
The expectation is you stay with what you choose?
Yes, we would like that.
My other question is, and I've heard this both in terms of a hypothetical, what would an in-person classroom feel like? I've also witnessed it through my own professional work. Is the assumption that the students would remain at their desks?
Yes.
Not moving?
Correct.
Outside of their desks?
Correct. And then one of the things that Shane and I were talking about today is Also, what does teacher movement look like in the classroom? So we do have to be very, very careful. And so we, we really were and are encouraging teachers to try to stay up at the front of the room. Some of our classrooms are larger than others in our new C wing, the new building. The classrooms have breakouts and you really can expand. And so if a teacher had to move through the room and could maintain 6 feet apart, that would be a possibility. But some of the stuff that we've been looking at is we have to be really careful with contact tracing, right? And so if you have Mr. Lerner test positive for COVID, and I've been up here the whole time, he's probably the wrong person to choose. Since he's coaching baseball right now. But for all of you at home, Mr. Lerner does not have COVID. So if the contact tracing is a little bit easier, and Shane and some other people can speak to this. I'm really just a teaching and learning person. But in terms of like who would have to quarantine, all those kinds of things, if we are very strict about our movement in the classroom, it would, one, lessen the spread rate, and two, make contact tracing a lot easier. So if I was moving all over this room and I had COVID, it's gonna make it tricky, right?
Stacy, I guess just to expand on Peter's question, could there be any flexibility in terms of it's a lab course where so the kids could have that hands-on experience in some of those classes?
I knew you were gonna ask that. So yes, so that's a whole other part that actually Stevie is going to talk a little bit about what some of those things would look like, because that's a big part, and one of the students said this, the hands-on learning, we offer so many things at Mundelein, Project Lead the Way and art and those kinds of things. And so we also want to make sure when they're in the building, they have some of those experiences. So Stevie's going to talk a little bit about that. Lisa, you got a question?
Yeah, and I don't know if I'm preempting Stevie on this, but this is current state for all students. And based on some of the survey data that we have, about half of teachers say that less than 75% of work has been submitted. And almost half say that they're getting no students to show up to office hours. Plus, we're hearing feedback from everyone that the no cameras, there's a lot of darkness.
Yeah.
So if that's our current state, and some students will be choosing that as their full-time thing, at least for the meantime. At any point, 75% of the other students are going to be in this, right? So what can we do to help to ensure that we're increasing the amount of submitted work and that teachers are reaching out, and what also can we do around the culture of cameras? I know that we want to not force it, but we certainly we need to do more to create a culture.
Yeah, and I love what you said about culture. So cameras, I find it incredibly difficult to teach to a bunch of black boxes, as do our teachers. We chose the concept of not mandating cameras because of some of the equity issues and some privacy issues for our students. Our classroom is entering their home. Their home is entering our classroom. And we have to be careful with that. So some students have, we heard from the students tonight, some students have siblings at home who might be jumping in the camera shot. Now, we've been working with our teachers to kind of validate that and accept that and like build that culture. That's okay, because we have all kinds of things going on at home, and that's what it's going to look like. So one of the things that I had hoped for is that as teachers are building relationships with their students, more students would put cameras on, because I hear a lot of teachers asking, could you please put your camera on? It enhances engagement, those kinds of things. So directly to your question, I would like to reevaluate the no camera policy. And yes, I said that publicly, so I hope I didn't make anyone mad right now.
And the other point is about how many students are not submitting.
Yeah,
How
work
do we
submission.
help understand what the barriers are to submitting the work.
So there's a few things. So you talked about office hours. The one thing with office hours is I wasn't as concerned with that, because the reason we went to this remote schedule is teachers have 75 minutes to work with students, and they do not have to do synchronous instruction, live teaching the whole time. So what some of our teachers are doing is the students who are not submitting work, who are underperforming, who are struggling, they're dismissing the class, and then they're meeting with those small groups of students, or they're meeting individually with students. Some of the things I've seen is in the beginning, as teachers are front loading their instruction, setting up that classroom and climate, trying to build those relationships, they're keeping the students together for a little bit longer in the period. So one of the things we've been trying to work on is how can we possibly start to build in that time where teachers can work with those students one-on-one? What does that look like? How do you do it effectively? The other piece, to your point, with submission, some of the feedback we've gotten is students do the work, but they don't know where to submit it. So Canvas, 50% of our students had used Canvas before they started this year. But 50% had not. Our freshmen had not. Canvas, you know, I like Canvas a lot, but it can be very difficult to navigate for both our teachers and our students. So we actually had a conversation today, and we're going to do some additional training with our staff on where do you go to submit the assignment. And some of our students are even finding it challenging to find the assignment. And so we need to make sure that that is consistent. So I love Canvas. I think it provides a consistent platform, and parents and students commented on that. But we also need to get a little bit better at helping them navigate that. And finally, to your last point, Dr. Jessica Herman, our Systems of Support Coordinator, is doing a lot with our data. She has a form in a system where teachers can reach out to get extra support for their students. And then we have counselors and social workers who meet every week and look at the data, and they identify students who need extra support, and then they create a plan for them. But at the end of the day, to your point, Lisa, this is a whole new way of learning for our kids, right? And I think we can't pretend that it's not going to come without challenges and obstacles for our students. I mean, we are in a global pandemic, as you all know, and there's this constant balance, at least this push and pull for me, in terms of the health and safety of our students, our staff, and our community, but also then providing a robust educational experience where students are going to thrive. Okay, at this point, I need to turn over to Stevie before Dr. Maris says, Stacey, you're cut off. So just a shout out to Stevie. She's our choir director. She's the vice president of the Mundelein Education Association. And I just want to give her a big shout out because she has been amazing the last 5 or so months. Like, I can't thank you enough for all you've done. Like, she has put so much time into the 5 different plans that we presented you. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Stevie.
Thanks, Stacey. All right, so today I'm here to talk a little bit about some of our specialized courses, as well as start the conversation about what our social distancing will look like in all of our classrooms in the school. So some of our specialized courses, including Project Lead the Way, Industrial Technology, Clothing, and Foods and Nutrition, will be using a combination of hands-on and virtual manipulative to further their study of their curriculum. Additionally, in a lot of these classes, teachers will be able to use document cameras and webcams, as Stacey sort of described, to have different views of the class, and also to have different observation of labs and other demonstrations going on. So that's a great way that we can kind of ensure that those students who are choosing to remain at home can really see as much hands-on as possible that's going on. So for example, a science teacher might be able to have another camera right over the lab that they are demonstrating, or that another student is working on, so that those students at home can really see what's going on. Next slide, please. So my main role here at MHS is teaching choir. Our discussions in our department and as a school have been incredibly challenging in determining what is the safest way to bring all of our students back. For choir and band, there is another consideration that we have to make in terms of what is safe for students when we do return to a classroom in any manner. As most folks are very much aware, COVID is spread through particles in the air. It is not necessarily just by touching or by distance. So that's called aerosolization. The aerosolization of the particles that we produce when we speak is very much dramatized when we sing or play an instrument. So even when we wear a mask when doing these things, there are certainly still some particles coming through our mask or around our mask. Because when we are singing or playing, we're using more air in a different way, there are more particles entering the space. Because of this, we have to make special considerations for those classrooms. This is different than just a traditional core classroom where students might be having a conversation. So again, this is specifically for our band and choir classrooms. The Illinois State Board of Education has outlined air exchange and turnover requirements, as well as air filtration requirements and recommendations for classrooms where there is singing, dancing, playing, etc. going on, where there's a higher rate of the aerosolization. So the air exchange per hour is the measure of the air volume added or removed from a space in 1 hour. And this measurement needs to be much higher in a classroom where singing or playing is going on. Additionally, the filtration using HEPA filters and other technology like that to ensure that the air that is in our space is really clean and safe for our students and staff must be different than in a traditional classroom. At this point, unfortunately, we are not confident that our facilities can provide that safe experience for our students and staff to sing and play in person. So as a department, this is the plan that we have come up with at this point in time as of today with the support of our administration. So in order to maximize rehearsal time and meet health and safety guidelines, in-person students will observe instruction virtually, but will not play instruments or sing in class. This is a very hard thing for me to accept as an educator, because as we are coming back, we're so excited to see our students, but I know that this is the right choice for their safety. Remote students will participate during class time as they have already been doing during e-learning. So our department made the choice to focus on the largest group of students that we could to further our curricular impact. So assuming that we have somewhere around 75% of our students virtual and 25% in front of us, we want to make that impact with the 75% of students that we can. So similar to right now, those students will participate in their rehearsal, whether they're singing or playing via Zoom. The teacher will be able to model and demonstrate and guide that rehearsal. The students that are in person during those class periods will not participate in the singing or playing due to the concerns of the air filtration and turnover rates, but they will be observing class during that time via Zoom. So this is one scenario in which there's a little bit of an exception to that when you're in school, you're not on Zoom. Due to the safety concerns, we do have to flip-flop that just a little bit for our students to keep them safe. So weekly ensembles, there may be an opportunity for ensembles to coordinate in larger spaces during the afternoon time to accommodate larger ensemble and rehearsals. So depending on health and safety guidelines, as well as building schedule availability, there may be some opportunities for larger ensembles to gather in indoor spaces, such as the gym, based on how safe our team decides that is and the availability of the space, of course. Ms. Ortiz, the next slide, please. So now we're talking a little bit about physical distancing in all classrooms. This does not pertain just to band and choir. This is for everybody in the building. As required by the Illinois State Board of Education, desks will be 6 feet apart. ISB requires that students and staff maintain 6 feet of social distancing during the entire class period. We envision having around 10 students in a room. As we discussed just a little while ago, there will be limited movement of both teachers and students around the classroom. Masks will be worn at all times, and students will stay at their desks, but will be able to communicate with those around them for small group work. So how Stacy described, students who are near each other will be able to communicate from a safe distance. Students who are virtual can remain virtual and go into those breakout rooms as they have been doing. I believe that is all for this section. I'd love to introduce my colleague, Hope Babbly.
Yeah,
I apologize.
No, you're good.
Oh, you're right. That's all right. Thank you, Dad.
Okay, just like
we engage in an evaluation of remote learning with focus groups and surveys, we will also do an evaluation of the hybrid model. First and foremost, we need to consistently look at the metrics, the ISB guidelines, and the Illinois Department of Public Health guidelines. And then we will be conducting surveys and focus groups. These are some of the success criteria we would like to look at. One, the effectiveness in following building safety procedures and guidelines. So this is really important, and this comes first. We'll also look at attendance, and then meeting the needs of our students, parents, and staff. This will come through that qualitative information that we glean from the surveys and the focus groups. And then to Laura's point, we have to continue tracking how students are performing in this environment. And so looking at that submission of work and looking at the assessment of evidence of their learning, what they are able to do, will be a really important part of evaluating the schedule, because it's not just about the technical aspects of the schedule, but it's about how it's impacting students' learning. Okay, so with that, we have Kevin Quinn and Hope Edwards, who will be talking a little bit about our facility.
Thank you, Stacy. I'm Hope Babowitz. I am the president of MESA 2 weeks into my job. I wasn't the only one, though, who eagerly jumped into this opportunity, and I very much appreciate it. I had 12 other people on my committee, plus Kevin Quinn, the director of facilities, who were asked to pull in all of their resources and get on their computers and do a ton of research. The nurse, security was represented, many teachers, fine arts department, technology. We had a real full representation of the building in order to come up with health and safety precautions relative to the building. Now, some of these items will seem redundant, some things that we've seen before, but for social distancing, if you've been in the building, you'll see that there's signs already in place. Signs that indicate cues outside of the guidance office and outside of the main office. And people have already been very respectful in following that visual indicator that we need to stay apart. There's signs in English and Spanish throughout the hallways to indicate that they're unidirectional, and the staircases are unidirectional. Moving the desks apart was one of the items. There won't be any eating at the desk, and all the rows will be pointed in the same direction. All the students' desks will be pointed in one direction. There's directional traffic stickers, lines with arrows that point the direction that you're supposed to take. So we continue to remind everybody visually of this importance of social distancing. In the employee areas also, there's been some requests for modifications, such as the installation of plexiglass on the desk, not only in the teacher's desk, but also in some of the employee workrooms. And also, especially in wellness, that's something that usually has a long touch point. So in this case, there's been modifications to the room usages and items that are used by students. The students are going to be responsible to clean them after they're used to in the class, and that's already in place with the weight room. As much as possible, athletics will be outdoors when possible. Then the next slide, please, Sophie. Again, masks will be worn. Bringing the student into the building from the bus. You saw the slide where temperatures will be taken there. There will only be 2 entry points into the building. On the bus side of the building, that's door 5, and at the main entrance, where everyone will have the temperature check unless they've already had the temperature check on the bus, and also be asked a questionnaire that was developed by our staff. Everything using IDPH and ISBE research, and also the Lake County Health Department in order to develop these procedures. Of course, every time somebody comes into the building, even visitors, they'll be asked these questions and have their temperatures checked. And then they develop procedures for students and staff who have symptoms of COVID. And then Kevin will address how they've built out an incredible nursing area to observe a student, and so he'll speak to that. Part of the contact tracing is a big thing with monitoring health and safety of everybody. And so students will be required to have their IDs. This will be an absolute must, because when they scan their ID, Power School will be able to develop a whole contact tracing model of the students. The staff are monitored through the Google Forms that the security enters the information in when the staff come into the building. So that's already actually in place for the staff, and something that has been very effective in terms of knowing where everybody is at all times in the building. And the last item I just want to talk about is one of the groups was charged with creating an inventory of PPE that is needed to be in place in order to have the building return with students and staff. And they've identified all the items that are needed. They've identified how many are already in the building, and then how many they will need to order at various intervals in order to maintain that level of PPE, including masks, gowns, eye covering, facials, things like that. Are there any questions? Yes.
Have you guys talked yet about the communication with students about their responsibilities and how to help them understand that if they want to be in school, this is what is going to be required?
I cannot answer that.
Yeah, so our group did, and so, what our, the common theme in our first group meeting was safety and accountability. So we're focused on safety. As a society, we understand safe things now. That develops. We're provided with greater guidance, whether it's through ISB, Illinois Department of Public Health, CDC, all those organizations provide us with guidance, so we're becoming more familiar with that. So the safety aspect, a lot of what we do is directed by guidance. So anything that we did as a group, one of our directives to all the sub-teams inside of our group was assign guidance to whether it's IDPH, whether it's IHSA, whatever it would be, assign that guidance, find it, dig deep into it, find it, read it, understand it. So then we can acknowledge that, we can put that out there. The other part of it is accountability, which we all have to agree now that we're personally accountable for our actions. We're accountable to one another, we're accountable to society as a whole. So that's very important in our group discussions. So accountability, yes, and we've talked in our group, how do we message that? How do we send that message out? How does that look? And then it's reinforced. So our group will exist as we return to school. Will we have to adjust? Will we have to adapt? Absolutely, we understand we will. Will we be provided more guidance? Will we understand the needs inside of our building with our co-workers, with the staff? 100% that we're going to have to do that. So accountability, that's key. And we're accountable to one another inside of our group. We function that way. As people come back into school, that still exists. As a society, we understand it. As we come back together collectively, we have to identify that. We have to call that out. We have to message that, and that message has to be reinforced.
So for the students, maybe, so like, keep the students comes right before we have to develop, but that's the other aspect.
Yeah, everything Mr. Quinn said is true. But, you know, on the student side, we're educating. Yeah, I'm trying to. You gotta get right by the mic.
Our new practices.
Yeah.
Welcome to the new normal.
No, so not unlike any other, I mean, obviously this is different, but not unlike any other year or any other time students come in the building, it's our job to teach the students what the expectations are. So, I mean, obviously not every student is listening to this presentation right now. So when we expect students to come back, it's our job as educators to ask, to show them what we expect, what they're allowed to do, what they're not allowed to do. All these new procedures, how do you check in with the counselor? How are you supposed to go see your game? When are you allowed to go in the hallway and get a drink? Like, what do you have to do in the bathroom? We have to teach our students all of these things. So we don't teach them, we can't expect them to meet it. So the first thing we're going to need to do is make sure students know what's expected of them, and then we have to follow through to make sure they do. Because unlike normal, I mean, this is a huge safety issue, right? So their behavior is affecting everybody else around them in ways that it never has before. So we do have to take it. I don't want to say we haven't taken it serious before, but there's a little different level of urgency on this one.
Yeah. Will there be a proactive approach for laying out some degree of consequence? Or is that we'll go with it as it occurs?
I don't want to answer the wrong question. So like if a kid takes a mask off.
Family is wearing, let's say it's my son. My son's walking around with his mask on, right?
Yeah.
And it continually is inappropriate. How many times are we going to allow that to interfere with the education of the other students? How many times are we going to allow for something like that? I guess what I'm asking.
Yeah.
We've seen the students who are 4 years older than these kids.
Yeah.
They're not the most compliant group.
Yeah. No, I can't give you a number, but it's not going to be, I mean, you have to meet these requirements. We're talking about student and staff safety, right? So if you're not willing to meet, if a student is not going to follow the procedures, we can't have them safely in the building.
My question is this, and I agree, there has to be an education piece to make sure that the student understands the expectation. That's crystal clear.
Yeah, we want to do that up front, right away. Here's why we're doing this.
As a part of that educational piece, a clear, crystal clear set of concepts.
Yeah, and we haven't had time in the committee to come up with that, but yes, that is something we're gonna do, but I want to make sure that I say that it will be taken very seriously. We're talking about the health and safety of every student, every staff member, everyone in the building, and not only the people in the building, as we said, they're gonna go home to other people, like to parents and grandmas and grandpas and things like that. So it will be taken absolutely seriously, and they have to follow it. And your son, I would tell me, wasn't catching his mask all the time, so you should have no reason not to wear a mask.
Another question? Those are some of the general questions. Maybe we could do at the end. I'd like to be able to finish up with health and safety precautions from the building side of you.
Okay, so what I would like to do before I'd like to preface this before I get into what our teamwork discussed is these discussions, these conversations existed in late fall and right after winter break in our school. The nursing staff noticed an increase on what they believe to be extremely severe flu season. And so they were focused on disinfection and how do we handle kids that are sick? How do we get them, take care of them, and then get them home? So those conversations existed, the identification of PPE, not to the extent that we're in now, but again, it was gloves, it was sanitizer, things like that. So kudos to our nursing staff. We're very lucky, very fortunate to have such professional nurses inside of our building, providing us with direction from their professional expertise. One of the items that they addressed and one of the items that we provided guidance on was that we needed to identify a secondary triage area inside of our building. So right next to our nurse's office, we did a build out over this past summer, and we used, we were fortunate enough to receive some CARE Act money to accommodate that. We built a triage area. It's all a self-contained unit now, so it's specifically what the guidance told us to do. So the air doesn't leave that room. It's warm air, cold air delivered from the unit inside the room. It's exhausted straight out. Not very energy efficient, but it's also not transferring any possibly contaminated air out into our building. The interstitial space, which is the space above our ceilings, is concealed. The exhaust goes directly out the roof, and then fresh air is brought in. So the idea was to identify somebody that has potential for having COVID, bring them in that space, get them out of the building as soon as they possibly can. But the building's isolated, the room is isolated. The nurses have perfected procedures for what happens when that happens inside of our building. We had some great discussions. PPE inventory with feedback from our nurses. One of our teams developed what we should maintain going forward as an inventory. So as a percentage of the whole, and that's still being worked out. We're still identifying that. Supply chains for PPE have strengthened. So we're fortunate that everyone said, well, the nurses need appropriate PPE before we even consider going to a hybrid model. The masks, having appropriate masks and having them fitted through Lake County was a major obstacle. Lake County came to the high school 2 weeks ago on a Friday, tested our nurses. We have the correct masks. They've all been fit tested. So we're in a good spot there. We need to maintain an inventory of that so that in the event that this happens again, or as we proceed for the duration of this, the students back in the building will have appropriate PPE. As far as physically in the building, Stevie alluded to air turnover and filtration and things like that. We have a building that's 392,950 square feet. A lot of different spaces, a lot of different usage of those spaces, a lot of different needs for air turnover. Auditoriums need to be turned over more frequently just because of the capacity and what's going inside of them. Our classrooms, the unit ventilators inside of our classrooms accommodate approximately 1 to 2 air turnovers an hour, 3 on the outside of that. Our auditorium can be 10 turnovers an hour. So our group's been looking at that. We've been talking about filtration. We've been talking about CDC guidance. We had a conversation within our group this morning about the CDC guidance that came out again yesterday and talked about airborne transmission. So it's been a tremendous group. We have feedback from all aspects of our school. We're fresh air into our building. Our building's pressurized, like you can think of a balloon. Because of that 392,000 square feet, we have to control the temperature. We have to allow for air turnover inside of our building. We release carbon dioxide when we breathe. The air has to turn over to get rid of bacteria to bring fresh air in to keep it treated and heated and cooled. So we're looking at all those. We looked at our filtration. We've updated. We've increased the frequency of our filter change outs on our mechanical equipment. We've maximized the filtration that we can put in. We can't have HEPA filters on everything. The equipment manufacturers dictate what kind of filtration goes on those pieces of equipment. Not many mechanical engineers were designing buildings or mechanical systems around a pandemic. So we have to put the best possible filters we can on our equipment, maintain the equipment, make sure our intake air and our exhaust systems are all functioning correctly. It was brought up in our committee, and Laura's on our committee the other day. What about getting an independent evaluator to come in and just look at the system as a whole? And so we're doing that. That's taking place starting this Friday. But it's been an ongoing process. We know our equipment. We know the shortcomings. We've worked on that. We can control how much fresh air we bring in through building automations. We have electromechanical equipment that we can control it through I can control it through a laptop. So average in a room is 10 to 15% fresh air brought into our building. We can up that. We can say 30 to 40% weather permitting outside. Last year during flu season, we overrode the program. So during the night where we could lower the temperatures a little bit, we could bring in 30 to 40% fresh air. In the morning time, shut that off about 4 a.m. and allow the temperature to get where it needs to be for the day. So we still have those capabilities and we're working on those. We're perfecting the way we clean the building. The district has purchased 2 electrostatic cleaning units. We're going through those 99.5 with the chemical that's effective on COVID. And we can go through part of our committee. I went with Justin Hart the other day. We went through the nurse's office. We went through a classroom to measure timing, how long that takes us. We went through our weight room for our edification, the classroom, a 10-person classroom, teacher's desk, door handle. We were in and out of there in 2 minutes and 17 seconds. Our nurse's office, we completed both sides of the nurse's office in 3 minutes and 8 seconds. The entire weight room, all sections of our weight room was 9 minutes and 10 seconds. We went to a bathroom right at the front of the school. Everyone's familiar with that as you walk in the door. We did that bathroom in 1 minute and 58 seconds. All the stalls, all the fixtures. It's a very effective disinfectant method. And so we're ready with that. We've had the opportunity since spring, those early, what we thought to be a severe flu season, we've had the opportunity to perfect our methods and the materials that we're using. We brought students in for testing more than a few weeks now. So every weekend we've had students in for testing for SATs. After that, the adult education group has tested people in the evenings, on Saturday evenings. So we've had 250 students testing for SATs. We've had 150 adults come in. We're disinfecting. We're working through that process. We're making sure that there's controlled movement inside of our hallways, that the signage is correctly, that we're operating. It's a more constricted environment, a more controlled environment. So we're doing our best to make sure that, again, that we're being accountable to how we disinfect. During the course of the day, as students come back in, we're going to be going around with those units, disinfecting common areas, disinfecting bathrooms, door handles. The accountability goes back to the students inside of the classroom. When you leave your space, you're going to have disinfectant in there, and you're going to have paper towels. You spray your surface, you wipe up your surface when you leave. We don't physically have the ability to clean 90 spaces in a passing period. That's impossible, and it wouldn't be very effective if we did. So the students are going to be responsible for that. And so that goes back to the accountability. So
I would like to say I was on that committee and had the opportunity to walk through the building and see all the things that they've thought of. Because it's so important that our staff and our students feel comfortable in the building, that they feel like we've taken the precautions that we need to take to make sure that we are bringing them back safely and not that things are going to go awry. So thank you for all your efforts. The nurses' room was amazing. Just how they arranged the classrooms, what hand sanitizing stations, bringing students into the building in a way that they're limiting, they're not just traipsing through the whole building, they come in the door closest to their classroom. A lot of thought has been put into the process of getting our staff and our students back in the building, but safety has been a priority. So thank you for all that effort and taking me around to show me what you've all been working on.
Yeah, I'd like to also share, I had walked the building with Kevin a couple weeks ago, and he was even more thorough when we walked the building than he just was in his estimation. That was excellent. That was almost 3 weeks ago. And 3 weeks ago, I saw plexiglass in rooms. I saw desk space apart. I saw signage all over the building. I saw cleaning disinfectant in the weight room to take care of those spaces. And that was 3 weeks ago. So I'm sure it's only gotten that much better since I was in the building.
What about classroom windows? Do they open?
Not every classroom has an operating window. So the idea of fresh air, we can bring fresh air that's been filtered into our mechanical system. Again, we think of our building as pressurized, and so that pressurization is what keeps the air turnover. We're underneath the guidance on mechanical systems under ASHRAE. That's the governing body for mechanical systems. So ASHRAE provides for a certain amount of air turnover, a certain pressurization in your building. If we open windows, if we open doors, we allow humid air. We allow air that's too cold, so it changes the indoor air quality as it's designed to be. So no, not every classroom, not every office has an operating window. There's places in our building where that's not possible. And so but that being said, every part of our building functions as a component of the whole. So windows for sure to bring in outside air to the extent that we're able to do that. I can do it. We can do it through our building automation system where we can allow every room to bring in more fresh air. And so the answer to your question, no, not everyone does. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are the closers. We are the survey committee. Ian and I
I'm glad.
Serve
you
on
get
the
his
final
caffeine.
committee.
Holy
The survey, yeah, you gotta get energized. This is the end. You're gonna ask questions and we're gonna close it all up for you.
All right,
And get on with the rest of the meeting.
okay.
Okay. All right. So the survey committee, one of many committees that you learned about this evening. Anthony and myself worked together on this. We also had parents also participate on this as well. And I'll be honest, Anthony did the lion's share here. I was like that little voice, kind of like, you know, Jimmy Cricket and Pinocchio, saying like, people need to know what they're signing up for. People need to know what they're signing up for. People need to know. I understand that there's a population of the community that wants virtual no matter what. They don't care what the plan is. They want virtual. There's a certain percentage of the community that wants to be in the building as much as possible, regardless of pandemic, regardless of anything. They want to be in, okay? So I was the voice that said, basically, people need to know what they're signing up for here. They need to know that their kids are responsible for cleaning up their own space. They need to know that there's going to be, you know, that when we do a hybrid system, we're not going to have your son or daughter is not going to be in school every single day. Okay, this isn't 2017. We'd like it to be, all right, we'd like it to be, but it's not. So the fact of the matter is that we work together and feel that we have an effective survey, educating the people. And there's a lot of text on that survey. If you see the survey, there's a lot of text there. There's no way to soften it, to tell you the truth. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that people needed to know. So we try to make it as clear as possible. We try to make it where, okay, when you actually have to answer the major question, okay, you know, what you want for your son or daughter, that there's a few bullet points there to kind of like summarize to help you focus. For the people who are, I understand, some people want hybrid, some people do not, okay? But for the people who are in the middle, who are trying to weigh this, all right, myself included, I'm a parent of the district, so trying to weigh it, okay? Trying to figure out what's best for, you know, my situation, and so then other parents can make, you know, the best decision for themselves as well, okay? So it was a very collaborative process, and we think that we have a survey where people will know what they're, you know, if they sign up for a hybrid, they know to a certain extent what they're signing up for, and that's important. And for signing up for, I mean, the virtual, I wasn't as concerned because they, you know, they kind of know what they're doing already. Okay.
So the survey went out on Friday last week. It closes this Friday. We've received a lot of responses, inquiries about more information, that the narrative may not have given them all the information they wanted. And so my response is wait till tonight's presentation. This survey is still open until Friday. Please respond after that. And of course, any parents who are listening, if you have more questions, continue to let us know what those questions are, and we'll help you along as you go through the rest of this week. The survey asks for very specific information, so we're asking for you as the parent to identify yourself and the child that you are choosing what their learning model will be. If you choose 100% remote, then that's done. If you're choosing for the hybrid, we're asking some follow-up questions, such as how will you know, what would your preferred way the child come to school? If they're a bus rider, do you want them riding the bus? You heard some of the information tonight about how that will look for students. Parents needed to know the background on them before they gave that response. Are they going to drive to school? Are they walking to school? Such as parents, do you allow your child to leave when they have a free period, a lunch period, or and they're not required to be at school? Do you allow them to leave the building? And so that's a consideration that we've asked for parents to weigh in on. So all that information is going to end up being used to create what Mike talked about earlier, how many groups we would need in order to go into the hybrid. So whether it's 2, 4, 6, 5, 3, whatever it would be based off of that response. At this point, we've had about 850 students accounted for in our survey. So we're almost halfway.
And it is split about a third, 100% remote, and 2/3 hybrid, which is consistent with what we saw in the summer as well. Okay. All right, and so one last piece, one thing we're going to communicate, and I want to share again with anybody in our audience. If parents do not respond to the survey, which we are sending reminders, tomorrow is a reminder, Friday there'll be a reminder, there'll be multiple reminders to say, please fill out the survey, but if they don't fill out the survey, we're automatically going to place them in the hybrid consideration. Okay, so that's where they're going to be placed. So that's a piece of it. Any questions?
Why would we do that?
Why would we do that? Because at this point, we don't have an indication that they are wishing to withhold their child from a hybrid experience.
We have to plan for spaces.
And it would also be easier for us to plan for them to be in a hybrid and for them to say, no, I don't want to do that after all. I'm going to go into the remote. It's easier for us to adjust in that direction. Okay. Gives us an idea, the more people who sign up for hybrid, the more groups that they're going to be, the less time the students are going to be in the building. Simple as that. So we need to, let's plan for, worst case scenario, if you will, like in terms of how we're going to deal with the most students on our campus, and then, then we can go from there.
Anthony, you mentioned a third and 2/3. What was that again? A third?
So currently, the response rate is a third, 100% remote, 2/3 hybrid. Not exactly. We're becoming somewhat reticent because the results are not done yet. We don't want to sway people one way or the other. If nobody took the survey for the remainder of the week, that excuse.
Is there anything built into the timeline? Like a survey ends on Friday. Is there anything built in that to contact some of these people? Let's say we have 200 people that respond. Is there any way that we can try to contact them first before so that we can kind of exhaust all measures? Yes,
actually, that's what we were working on this afternoon. Everybody who's responded so far is cleaning up the data for all the people that made multiple responses for the same child. And now that there's a single response, we're putting it in PowerSchool. Now I will know who has responded and who hasn't. Those who have not, I can make an automated response, text and email that will go out just to those who have not responded to the survey multiple times. So as we go forward with that information, the intent is how do we phase people back into the building? Okay, so we've already started that this week. On Monday, we had 2 populations of students come back to in-person instruction in the building, our supported learning program and our transition participants. So that has already begun. And those teachers were well aware that that was happening 3 weeks ago. And there was conversations prior to that as well, but that was when the deadline was kind of spread and we went from there. Right now, we are targeting November 2nd. There was not a slip there. November 2nd.
I made that same mistake.
Yeah,
I think I had it.
when we would want to bring back all of our students in a hybrid model, meaning that we would have them in groups and we would be going through those groups through the schedule that Mike presented earlier.
If the metrics allow that Mr. Lerner and I presented earlier.
This is the earliest possible window.
If things are all good.
Yeah. So, and then staff, we're gonna have staff back 1 week prior for them to get used to the building rhythm again, the safety features that are in the building and such, and become more acquainted with the building prior to students coming in to the facility as well. This Friday, we also offered our staff, if they're interested, to do the exact same thing that Kevin was just mentioning, to go through the building and see all the changes. There are some staff who have not been back in the building since March. There are some staff who have been back every day. But for those who may wish to see that, we are offering those tours this Friday so that they may come in, see what it looks like, see the feel, and get a better idea of what we've been talking about.
If I can interject, and I'm speaking to the room here, but I'm also speaking to the faculty of which I represent.
A lot of them did not know a lot of the details that are presented today, okay? Some of the information that was coming out would be that faculty would be reporting on October 19th. That has been delayed a week. That has been delayed a week, in case you did not see that in the email. I've had numerous people ask me about their enclosed place, not just classrooms, but office spaces, counselors, social workers. How can social distancing happen? Please, 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 if you have those questions, contact Dr. Kroll, or was it to Peggy? Or I don't remember. Okay, to Peggy. Contact for tour, so you can see your workplace and give feedback for what you need to see in those rooms. That's important, faculty and certificated staff, especially if you haven't been into the building for a while, so that you know that we can get, so people can get things ready by October 26th. This is important.
If I could just ask a question and something to consider with the dates there. With the staff coming back on the 26th, during that first week there, will there be any staff development time for them? Because what Stacy explained, that's gonna be like a lot to take on.
Everything is fluid, but right now it's, as far as in terms of what I understand, it's like October 26th, I'm going to be teaching my classes. So I have to, it probably behooves me to get there a little early than October 26th and figure out how am I going to set up my classroom. Normally I use my desktop at home. I'm going to have to use my laptop now, and making sure that that's all hooked up. Haven't been in my room more than a couple days, 3 days in August since March. Is my room torn apart? I don't know. Everything as an educator yourself, you know that in the summer things happen, right? So just I would encourage people maybe stopping in if they can. Some faculty live quite a ways away, but I'm in the district, so it's easier for me. But
so currently, on our current schedule where we're at right now, we have time built in for professional development, which until we get to this date, we're still on that schedule. When we go to the 26th, one of the considerations that we will probably need to institute is that we would be switching to the hybrid schedule that Mike showed earlier. And the rationale behind that is, the rationale, I'm trying to remember some of the details of it, I'm sorry. But we wanted to sort of make that switch, and we will have some of our special ed students, our high incidence special ed students, may be returning that week. And if they do, then we want to have them on that new hybrid schedule immediately as well. So that's part of consideration to that move.
So there's a good chance that our current schedule will only last up to the week prior to the 26th, not up to the.
Our current schedule would last until the 26th.
Till the 26th, yeah.
And that's the other thing I was looking at to take under consideration, under the assumption we went to a 4-group model, if we started on November 2nd and we went in that order, group 4 would only have 2 in-person days in the month of November because of Thanksgiving week. So I was just thinking that might be something to take into consideration.
They probably all would, right?
No. The other 3 groups would have 4 days. Maybe 4 would only have 2.
Okay.
Yes, sir. And also was then asked, we had a virtual conversation about freshmen. Would we bring freshmen in specifically? And we decided that would just lengthen the time before everybody else came back. And so we decided that we would just rather bring all students back. However, the afternoon, and this is again a good reason why we're on that different schedule the week prior to all students returning, the afternoon for the freshmen that would come back the next day, the afternoon prior, we will bring them in to give them a link through tour so that they can find their actual physical classroom.
Right.
So that they know where they're going to go on the 2nd.
Sure.
So that would be, we would include that piece in the afternoon prior to the day before. So that would be a rolling event. So as that freshman has their first day, the afternoon before will be that event.
So 2/3, close to 1,300 students, is that 4 groups? Or is that?
That's probably Fort Bridge, right?
Okay, so, last question, I guess, how would siblings, be accounted for in the groups for, because we talked about the built-in, quarantine, so for families, would siblings be in the same group 1, group 2, or could they possibly?
Right, Mike. Well, there's a lot of pressure that I've been putting on Mike for that exact conversation, because we do know that that's one of the hot topics for parents. Do I want to, am I going to be made sure I'm with my sibling, or am I with my friends, or with my, so those are good questions.
Thinking about it being 60. So what, out of all the options we're looking at, a few of the more popular ones are obviously alphabetical, which most of the time accounts for siblings, but not always, right? And another way of doing this is transportation routes, like where your bus routes are, and where you're. If let's say we transport everybody, like by geographical location. Now, not asking every student that lives in the west side to come one day, and all the students, one group from the west, one from the here, one from the right, to make sure we're getting a little bit of everyone. But that way you're accounting for who you live with at least. That's another consideration of that. So again, we do want to make sure we make the least amount of groups as possible, but we'll do the best thing we can. We'll do the best we can to accommodate people that live together and that will ride together and things like that. Yeah.
And in terms of the survey, we also have it where people who, if they decide to have a hybrid situation, they could choose whether or not they want all their children to be hybrid or not. Maybe they have 2 or 3 children in the building, 1 wants to be hybrid and 2 want to be virtual, or 2 want to be, hybrid and 1 wants to be virtual, whatever. So we are also, we tailored the survey to account for families that want to split up.
General questions up?
Could you restate on the 26th, the schedule that students would be on?
The schedule, starting October 26th, when staff come to the building, staff and students would move to the schedule that we presented here earlier today. The hybrid built schedule, correct.
What happens after noon? For students, their day is done?
Their day is done.
Yeah. There may be some specialty things that may happen there, but that does allow for afternoon, that does allow for some creativity where we could do some scheduling of things. But what we've done at this point is that would be time for office hours, and then the staff work time that has been rearranged from the day earlier and put into the afternoon.
And also the fact, it was brought up earlier, but there's so much information in terms of making sure when you have, I forgot what I was going to say. What was the issue with regard to when we're moving it to the new schedule? I can't remember. I'll think.
We will also need to create some time. We have to define that schedule for our faculty at this point. We haven't done that. And what needs to be defined is when would PLC time, teacher office hours, and teacher work time be, so we have time for our staff meetings when we need to have them. We have to define that time for them.
Also, one difference that it might be harder to see is that the Wednesday, the all virtual day, the class periods are longer, significantly longer. Right now, they're currently 30 minutes long. Now they're significantly longer than that. So again, total minutes per class will be only 10 minutes shorter than current. Per like, so period 1, not per class, like class period, but for example, social studies, okay, per week, it'll be 10 minutes less per week. So Wednesday will be longer, the other days will be a little bit shorter.
The one thing I think I'll make sure we get that. The one thing we've got to be careful of with asking questions is being able to say we still need to do more planning too, as we look at these different schedules. So that's just an idea of being able to share what we're looking at with having those plans come in. We've got to be able to get back to our teams yet and be able to see how this can really work. I mean, because right now we're here before you in front of the board saying, hey, here's where we're at right now. I'd love to tell you we got answers to it all. We don't. And it takes a lot to be able to say that, but I know what will happen. We will have the answers and have the plan fully vetted before anything else moves forward. So just be confident in that. Are there other general questions in regards to the presentation tonight?
I'll just take a minute to say thank you for putting all the committees together and letting us as board members come and join to see the process that you're going through to make this all happen. There's so much involved to make it safe for him, so thank you.
Yeah, so impressed, really.
So I know normally I probably like to be able to take a break.
Yeah.
I think the one thing we do need to be able to hear, what I'd appreciate being able to hear you as a board, you've been able to hear the presentation. I know you've had feedback from our community and responses. Where are you at in regards to hybrid and remote, kind of after you've heard what was presented tonight to help give us more directions going forward in general? And then are there other items you want us to look into? I mean, one of the things I heard is about the transportation and the AM PM route. So I would like clarity from you as a collective group of where you are with the hybrid or remote moving forward. And if there's additional information that you would like us from an administrative point, work with the committees, to come back to you.
I like the presentation. I like the parents having a choice to decide what they want to do. And I like the idea of, based on the metrics, how we move through the phase. So, I like the presentation and I like where we're going.
I think from a safety standpoint for not only the students, but especially for the faculty, I think you found a way to get the kids back into the building safely and, you know, minimize how much student faculty interaction there is from a safety standpoint with having them leave in the afternoon. I think in that regard, I think it's a great compromise. I think the presentation on what the classroom is going to look like for people at home versus people in person. I'm doing it at my school right now. I don't have people in person, but I go in and teach from my classroom just so I get a feel for it with the camera. And what you have planned, I think, is about as good a plan as you can have in place. If you're going to have teachers doing both at the same time. I also think from a teacher standpoint that with some practice and some managing, that it can create a situation where they're not teaching 2 lessons every day. It gives them a way to teach all of the students together effectively at the same time. So I think you've addressed some of the major concerns I would hope that the faculty are having. And from a safety standpoint and seeing the building, I'm very comfortable personally with where the building's at from a safety standpoint. I guess one thing to take into consideration moving forward is just, you know, obviously we're in full in-person learning normal schedule. We're looking at 250 minutes a week of class typically. So if there's any way at some point that we can move toward recouping some of those in-person minutes or virtual minutes, I think that would be a great compromise for everybody too. I think overall you guys have taken so many things into consideration.
Yeah, I'm going to be pretty brief. I think this is a really good plan and really allows everybody to get more of what they want. And at the same time, it's really adhering to the 2 main principles that we're looking out for, everybody's health and safety and the best educational experience. I want to reiterate that I think it's imperative, and you even mentioned it in yours, that we work together to make sure that every student gets the same kind of learning experience, whether they choose all remote or they end up in a hybrid schedule. And I think that having everybody be accountable, from the students to the staff, to the parents, to the admin, to the community, and if we're all working together, I think this is definitely a workable thing.
So, I feel like we're making steps in an important direction. We're working with unknowns in terms of how long we're going to be dealing with this pandemic situation. And so I think it's going to take intention and courage and focus to
the constraints on the plan, I would encourage you to be creative about if it's lunch building space, that's the constraint. Let's think creatively about that. We fortunately are very well financially managed, and there may be some things that we can do. And if this isn't the time to use some of our resources financially, I don't know what is. So I think that would be interesting to see if money weren't a constraint. Are there some other more creative options to address those things that are most constraining us? Most importantly, though, I think that we have the opportunity to spend a lot of time and energy to figure out how to get back in school. However, even with this hybrid design, we're going to have students who are only learning remote, and we're going to, the majority of time, students are going to be learning remotely during these early phases. And because of that, I hope that we aren't missing the opportunity to address the more challenging aspects of that. Specifically, the fact that students aren't able to navigate Canvas and teachers aren't doing that consistently yet, that probably is something that can be fixed and addressed. And the camera culture, how do we create a culture where people are more likely to be participating via camera? I think that the future for these students that we're teaching is going to have some degree of requirement to be visible online. And we're doing them a disservice if we don't make that happen for them. So whatever we can do to help address the privacy issues so that we can be more requiring about that. And then also we, especially not as much tonight, but through the emails, we've been seeing a major concern about the mental health concerns, and making sure that we're being proactive about helping people understand what the resources are, as well as identifying students and staff who are having challenges with mental health, and how do we not lose sight of that.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, I would say this is a great step for scaling effort to address the need for robust education and the need for students and staff to feel safe within the building. I see all the work that went into it. As Stacy said, this is the fifth plan that we've kind of had as the situation has changed so much over the past couple months. So I think it's a great first step. I would echo what Lisa said. The mental health issues are some of the issues that I've heard from the emails, that if there's anything else additional that we can do to help our students, because I know it's not just the students. I see it with parents. They're either juggling kids at home while they're trying to work, or they've lost their jobs, so financial strains are becoming an issue. Is there any resources we can help offer families? Because it's not just the students that are affected, a lot of times it's the parents. And then you're isolated from the grandparents who might normally be able to step into this situation, but right now they can't. So I would echo that, the mental health services, if there's anything available that we can offer. And the other thing is, as we go through this and people become more comfortable, if you can't work on one situation, could we do an AMQ? Like, what would the cost of transportation be? Is there a possibility we can do that? Just a little bit more poking around to get the kids into the building more often. Again, following the metrics to make sure we're doing it safely.
Okay. Appreciate it. Sarah, go ahead. Sarah, then Peter. Sarah.
One, like the presentation. I think it was very nice to see all the aspects of the team providing to the school and the facilitators too. I like the timeline now that we can have a date, like how to go forward and the different stages. And I like those 10 days, to be consistent and so on, and then going forward, I think they kind of will go rapidly and it's all safe moving back. And I think the parents would like to see that too. I like the choices for the parents and students who have the hybrid or so. It's not just like one choice and that's all what you have. No, they have a choice to to be more comfortable for their level, for safety. I like the choices too that they can provide that extra support for students who are in need, like that extra hours or so. So they're not just like the 4 hours, like in the morning, that's fine, they also have support too if they need it. Maybe I would like to see, since everybody, most of the parents concerned about their kids suffering for social, emotional, and not being social with their friends and suffering from anxieties or something. I don't know if like maybe social workers also can provide like presentations for the students, how to cope with these situations until it all gets back to them. Or some kind of an exercise they can participate to or so. And so they don't feel just like isolated or like, okay, I'm just at home and nothing else to do. But maybe be activity with providing not mental health, but try to cope with the situation.
Thank you. Peter? I think we've come a long way since March, both in terms of our efforts as a community and our understanding of this pandemic and how we live our lives and what we need to do to keep ourselves safe and keep each other safe. We don't live in a bubble, but I think as a community we have to consider Mundelein is our bubble, and we have to do what we can do to maintain what we all want, which is to get back into the school. I think the collaboration that we were able to be a part of on these committees and hear from the community members tells us that we're all in on this together. We've got to figure some things out still. And I think that's what we've said from day one was we need to be flexible. We need to be creative. How we solve the lunch problem, I'm not yet satisfied. I think there's more there to do. Social emotional screenings. I don't know what we're doing in that regard, but I think we should, because I think there are two concerns there. One is the significance of an anxiety and a depression. And the other one is the over-application of those terms. If we're overusing those terms, we're really minimizing the severity of those who are truly suffering from anxiety and depression. We can all tolerate levels of anxiety, but if we overuse those terms, we may be taking away from the severity of those who are truly suffering and need treatment. I think we have responsibility to point families and students and colleagues in direction to get the support they need. And we shouldn't be reckless with those terms either. Where we were in March, where we are now, and knowing and seeing buses in our parking lots this morning confirms to me that we can take steps forward. We can learn to live with risks. We can manage those risks, but we have to move forward. We could be in this same boat in 8 months. And if we're not moving forward, and if everybody else is, we're doing the biggest disservice to us. And we're here for the kids.
Kevin, I just want to add one last thing. As best as possible we can, I'd like us to consider working with our staff with their concerns about, because we haven't, I know there's a survey out for the teachers, but they're a critical piece of this whole puzzle. And I'd like us, as best as we possibly can, work with our staff to accommodate them in any way possible for their concerns.
Okay. Very good. Thank you.
Next thing we have is report action items.
Really helpful. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all.
Good night.
And anybody that presented tonight, you want to go, it's time to go. Don't need to stay.
Are we gonna take
There's incentive to get done with these next few items, Lisa. So I think I can help us get through some of these, and then I can take the first one, I always want you to go back up. So the first one, fasten your seatbelts, hold on, 'cause here we go. It's an intergovernmental agreement with the College and Career Navigator. This is the position that we had last year from the College of Lake County. We were the pilot program for them at District 120 last year. Through its progress and analysis, Dr. Crow and Mr. Buick working with them, they've now expanded that program to other high schools in Lake County. What this request is to update the intergovernmental agreement with the College of Lake County to have that position remain as a counselor here at District 120 for another year. And CLC is picking up the charges for the salary and benefits. So we've seen it as a benefit. It's all in line with what we did in previous years. The data sharing agreement is the exact same thing we have with them for all of our students that we have going here anyway. So it's all in line with what we've done in previous years past. The recommendation would be that we do retain this intergovernmental agreement with CLC.
So can you clarify, does the resource from CLC help promote all post-high school training and?
All post-high school, whether it's technical, 4-year, 2-year, wherever, they're there to help assist with the students to find a next step after high school. Yes.
Pretty cool.
It's unbelievable.
Yep. And well, how did you measure that it was successful?
Dr. Cron?
I would say the number of successful transitions. We always have about 80 to 100 students go to CLC a year. And when they arrive at CLC, their application or their registration is in shambles, or they're not quite sure what they're going to be doing, and they don't have a plan. Eileen created all that and finished all that prior to their graduation. And as this now transitions, she will then navigate with them their freshman year, following them and their choices, making sure that they had a good transition.
Okay. Moving on then, school board policy 680. As we have been going through our board policies, this one came up because it was last adopted in 2005. And we shared that with the attorney, Dr. Kroll did. And upon review, the attorney said we had a more recent update available in 2017. Long and short of it, the updated policy is much more clean as far as reading and understanding. It has the bullet points for what can and can't be talked about in regards to controversial issues. So what we would ask is this be a first reading on school board policy 680, with the main thing being we're looking to have a more updated policy that's reflective going forward. Okay. Press policy then 105 is the next topic. It is the second and final reading. So those were the same ones we've had prior to. Most of it deals with Title IX. So if you have questions on that, I direct you to Shane for those. The other ones are updates that we've had in previous policies. Nothing that I'd say is significant as far as change in what has happened from previous policies.
Yeah, the question I had on this one was, there's not a Title IX coordinator named at this point. Is that something that?
We do have one name.
Later?
So Shane McCrary is our Title IX person.
Okay. I didn't see it in the policy.
It might not have been in that press grouping, Lisa, because I know it's been on others for us that we have. But yes, Shane would be that designated person. At times, what we do is just insert a title so that if the person changes, we don't need to change, have the policy come back to the group.
Got it.
If you don't mind, I'm going to skip to the next two, and then let the last one be a discussion. So skipping down to resolution to select an IASB delegate. Everybody, Tom raised his hand. All right, Tom it is.
Hey, Tom.
So
Thanks, Tom.
Tom had volunteered again to be the delegate, even though the Triple I conference is not taking place this year in November, they're still conducting the delegate process and having virtual PD as well. So Tom has been gracious enough to go through the resolutions. The important part is nominating him or to vote on The other part is giving Tom any feedback that you have in regards to the resolutions that have been put forward. Because there are 2 meetings prior to our November board meeting that the discussions are gonna happen, where Tom needs to be informed by you before it goes to vote in November.
And then although you sat in on that virtual Zoom thing, it was interesting because there was a lot of talk about, can I sit with somebody and you guys can watch in and do this? And you can certainly do some of that, but it's just one vote. You only be able to put one vote in.
So what you should do is look at before it's time to vote. Look at the issues that they're discussing right now and what we need to have an opinion on, and so that we can make sure Tom is representing us the way we want.
I was just saying, just a reminder, I'm voting on behalf of the board, not myself.
Right. Yeah,
You're
so-
giving me direction.
So what I found helpful is we have a page like this
Yeah.
that says support and oppose. So if you come to the meeting with what you support and oppose, it'll help us to have
Where do we have that?
quicker conversation.
Is the resolution packet?
In the packet at the beginning of the resolution section. So this is kind of a cover page, and then it has descriptions of each of the resolutions and whether the committee is suggesting that we support or oppose it. And then we can come with an opinion about support or oppose, and then tease out the ones where we don't agree.
So we would actually need the board, if we're not ready for that this evening, to fill those out, get those sent to Anna, so we can forward them to Tom. So it has the board's feedback.
And the voting assembly is Saturday, November 15th, so that's when I'll be casting the vote on behalf of the board.
So we will have a board meeting.
Yeah.
So we should, next time, we'll put it on the agenda.
November.
Yeah, exactly, and that's why.
Thought it wasn't. Okay, good. So that worked out well then. November. Okay. And then the last one for administrative reports. Lisa and Laura have been working on a draft for board policy 712, racial educational equity development. There is a copy of the draft in the manila folder. I did also email you a copy this afternoon. So I will turn this over to Lisa and Laura.
Yeah, so the takeaway from the last time we discussed creating a racial equity policy was that Laura and I would work on it together, and we have not been able to connect.
Have not.
So what you're hearing is my first draft as a pass at trying to just move us ahead a little bit. And what we had as examples were from Oak Park and River Forest 200 and Evanston Skokie 65 policies. Based on those, I read through both of them and found that both of those examples stated the value of equity to all, meaning equity is not just about benefiting people who might have not had the benefits in the past. It really is for society as a whole. Everyone's going to benefit when we have more equity in our society. But also both of those acknowledge the history, institutional, and bias issues as things to be addressed as part of equity. Both of them address intersectionality, meaning that racial equity is just one, or ethnic one is just one dimension of many that could be affecting any individual. Both of them distinguish between equality and equity, and were explicit in those definitions. And both of them included some accountability. So when I merged the two together, I kept those elements. The District 200 emphasized some definitions. The other one, District 65, was more about the responsibility. And so I took those and kind of leaned into the strengths of both of those. So this is very much just a one person so far draft for you guys to respond to. When you're looking at it, you'll note that I have captured Mundelein High School District 120, but also and possibly 75, because that was part of our theme from the last meeting was, can we do this in partnership with 75? You'll see I had a couple things in blue here because I didn't think they were quite clear. And then the ones you have attached are the examples that we were given before. So
At this point, just consider this kind of a draft for you guys to respond to when we have some more time. I don't think we have a deadline as much as let's continue to move this forward. In the meantime, we were talking about where 75 is in their process, and they are thinking maybe they want to get facilitation help or whatever. I would suggest maybe you say, hey, by the way, this is our approach. We have borrowed two, we pulled from them, and it's just our first draft that we will be continuing to talk about. See if they have interest in walking this journey with us, or they may not be as ready.
Well, District 65 that's in here is an elementary school district, so it's kind of like it's already kind of being laid out for them.
Yeah.
Would there be some benefit in recommending potentially them meeting with the same group we met
That's what I
with
was
tonight?
thinking. Well,
Because if they want to go down a similar path to us, it needs to start at that young age. So what better group for them to start talking to?
We can certainly make that offer. I think what we've got to focus on is knowing that as a collective group, you've done a lot of work getting to this point and being able to talk about equity with the study of the articles and engaging with students in the way you did today. So I think what would be critical right now is maybe what Lisa's saying, using the 120, providing that as saying, here's where we're at, do we want to work on this together, and then being able to see where the commonality lies. I would say, one of the things we talked about with shared service, they're still going to be combined, but there's still some individual unique qualities for each district, and that's what we still need to be respectful of. So I'd like to think, yeah, we could do that at some point, Aaron. We just need to pick the right time.
And speaking of the group we had this evening, they would be a good group at some point also to say, okay, here's
some ideas.
Here's a draft. Is this addressing some of the things that you think are important?
Well,
In
I think-
addition to the other.
Yeah, we learned some things with them tonight that we can also incorporate into this.
Could we, in consideration of District 75, not necessarily work collaboratively, but can we at least offer them an opportunity? If someone wanted to be the contact person, or if they wanted to listen in, or if they wanted to see some of the research or products that we talked to, so that, or at least let them know it's available, so that they don't feel as though when they do take on something like this, that they're reinventing the wheel.
That kind of extension, that kind of leads into my question, would it be better for us to do this and then get their buy-in, or the local? You know what I mean, are they not thinking, are they not as far we are right now?
So District 75, in regards to this policy, is in a very similar spot, different approaches. So right now, their policy committee is looking at the two examples that we shared with you at 120 also. And now their next meeting, they're talking about how they want to be able to move forward. Is it a small group? Is it a bigger setting where there's like a strategic planning model? Where you get parents, students, community members, and you do that for half a day. That's what they're discussing.
Would there be any benefit to Laura or Lisa to be at that board meeting, just to open public comment and say, when you do address this, we'd love to work with you if you want to?
I think it would even be fine if anybody wanted to email one another and say, hey, we're the 120 contingency working on this policy. We hear that 75, you're the contingency. How do we want to work on this together or not? I think people will want to work together. I think it's finding that happy ground.
And at their next meeting, are they gonna identify their two?
No, they already did. So
Oh, they
Lisa
did.
St. Clair and Wells Price are their policy.
Oh, okay, good to know.
There's your emails.
You guys can introduce yourself. So in summary, are you guys suggesting that Laura and I take the next step of reaching 75? In the meantime, agreeing that you will read this for our next meeting to give us some input? Are those next steps?
That sounds good.
That sounds perfect. Beautiful. And while we're on this topic, you know, the students today, I can't even imagine how they approached all of our policies to give us a limited, well thought out number of proposals. And it seems like we need to talk to them about what
what we're gonna do with that, or how we process policies or something, so. I don't really need to answer it tonight, but I do think we need to make sure we get it at some point.
So I do talk with Trey once a month. Going over stuff, so we'll work through the policies. It's on my notes as a follow-up. Pull our policies, see what they're asking for, recommending, and being able to get more input from where can we not move in regards to policies.
So you have the next step on that.
Yeah,
That particular.
got Trey, and I would bring that back to you, the board.
Hey, Kevin, a quick question. 2 years ago, when I took on a board, Laura, you have more history. Wasn't there a student that kind of represented the students at board? Or am I mistaken on that?
Before my time.
Okay. I thought there was like a student rep or something, or the idea was to think maybe have that. I don't know if that's possible or.
So what ended up happening was in prior years, there was a student rep that would come and report to the board. The problem became we could no longer find consistency for having students coming to report to the board.
That group seems pretty motivated. And with them having seniors and sophomores, it seems like that's gonna continue on with the seniors as well.
Yeah.
So maybe that's down the road, that could be a possibility.
Trying to develop that momentum.
Yeah.
Right. And then
Okay,
That's it for admin reports.
all right, so we on the board action items. Are we there?
Yeah.
All right, so the first action item is the intergovernmental agreement for college and career navigator. The recommended motion is that the Board of Education of Mundelein High School District 120 accept the superintendent's recommendation to approve intergovernmental agreement for college and career navigator as presented. Have a motion?
So moved.
Mellon,
Yes.
Wellington,
Yes.
Yasi, yes, vote,
Yes.
Davalos,
Yes.
Moinet,
Yes.
Pastrelli.
Okay, the next one is press number 105, second and final reading. Recommended motion that the Board of Education of Mundelein High School District 120 to accept the superintendent's recommendation to approve press number 105 as presented.
Second.
Pastrelli.
Yes.
Moinet,
Yes.
Wellington,
Yes.
Yasi, yes, vote,
Yes.
Davalos,
Yes.
Mellon.
Yes.
Last one is resolution to select an IASB delegate. The recommended motion is that the Board of Education of Mundelein High School District 120 accept the superintendent's recommendation to adopt a resolution to select Tom Lumet, board member, secretary of the board, as the Illinois Association of School Board Delegates from Mundelein High School District 120 Board of Education. What you said, but that's.
So moved.
Second. Mellon,
Yes.
Yasi, yes, vote,
Yes.
Davalos,
Yes.
Moinet,
Yes.
Pastrelli.
Yes.
Wellington.
Okay, we're going, we have an executive session, all right? Yes. Yeah, so we need to adjourn a regular session to go into executive session. Can I have a motion to adjourn regular session?
So moved.
Second. Moinet,
Yes.
Davalos,
Yes.
Mellon,
Yes.
Pastrelli,
Yes.
Wellington,
Yes.
Yasi, yes, vote,
Yes.
9:42.
Open, return to open session.
So moved.
Second. 10:12, okay. Actually, I think this is a. We'll do this. Mellon,
Yes.
Davalos,
Yes.
Moinet,
Yes.
Pastrelli,
Yes.
Wellington,
Yes.
Yasi, yes, vote.
Yes. Okay, so the first thing I have, one thing we need to take action on is executive session minutes. The recommended motion is that the Board of Education of Mundelein High School District 120 accept the superintendent's recommendation to approve the executive session minutes for August 4th, 2020, August 11th, 2020, August 12th, 2020, and August 20th, 2020. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second, Mellon,
Yes.
Yasi, yes, vote,
Yes.
Davalos,
Yes.
Moinet,
Yes.
Pastrelli,
Yes.
Wellington? All right, the last thing on the agenda is President's Prerogative, which I will keep very, very brief tonight because it's been a long, long day. I just personally want to say thank you guys for everybody taking time to do work on committees and doing a passover at the equity policies and all the extra effort and time. I know this is a challenging time in the district with a lot of input and concerns, and a lot of us have kids here, so thanks everybody for taking the time to really put in the effort that we need to get through this. And I will say the same for administrators who are still here. I know this has been a bumpy 7 months and we've got a ways to go, so thanks for your time. Is there anything else you need from us when you got your comments about the other maybe options that we might explore? Do you have everything you need?
Got them all written down.
All right, so we're good on that. I think we're gonna just call this in.
So one last President's Prerogative that came in. Would like to give kudos out to Master Board Members Program recipients. It's just an acknowledgement, because one of the things District 120 said 6 years ago was you wanted to keep achieving school board governance recognition. And that meant going through the trainings, attending the Lake County dinners that were representative of board members where you got together and could do professional development together. Through those efforts, we've maintained our board recognition. We're one of many in Lake County. Lake County is one of the best counties for having their boards achieve that level. And as part of that, Sarah Davalos is a level 3 master board member. Nice job. Laura Mellon is also a level 3 board member. There we go. Tom Wimet, level 3, board member. Laura Vogt, Leadership Academy member, gets the pin. Very nice. And Lisa Yaffe, Master Board Member, level 1 entry. Little Pell pin. Thank you very much. Keep it up. Thank you very much. Appreciate everything you're doing.
Second meeting.
Aaron made a second meeting. I usually don't go like this all the time, but I think in a very challenging climate that we're in, with being able to hear our community, listen to the options, you've been very reasonable and being able to handle a lot that's been coming your way. And I think that says a lot to you as a board and how you operate. And I want to say thank you, because that makes our jobs easier on the school end of things, trying to work through stuff. So your support is greatly appreciated.
And one last comment, and we'll close this down. If there's anything that we can do to help the staff or administrator burnout, if there's anything that would be, I know this is a difficult time for everyone who's gone through 5 plans. If there's anything we can do to support you, let us know, please.
We don't need to call a special meeting in a week, right?
I think we're okay. Motion to adjourn?
So moved. Second.
We didn't comment about last night, the National Society, for the watch.
NHS?
Oh, I forgot to do.
Oh, yeah.
Yes,
I think it was just kind of nice.
it was very nice. The National Honor Society, several of us attended via Zoom.
Yeah.
It was a little bit unusual, but they did a nice job of it.
Okay.
Excellent. All right, we met.
Yes.
Mr. Ali.
Yes.
Wellington.
Yes.
Yaffe, yes. Vote. Yes. Davalos.
Yes.
Mellon.
Yes.
Ending 10:17.
Not a record, but it's close.
It started so early.
We did.
Considering what we all got through tonight,
And I would say it's close.
Yeah.
We had that one,
No, 5-hour meeting, yeah.
we had that one where we were